Don't Kiss Your Enemy. Written by Victorine Liskey. Narrated by Liz Crane. Chapter 1. Amanda leaned over with her paintbrush, finishing up the large B on her sign that, when finished, would read, "Stop the bulldozers! Save the Opera House!" She wasn't sure how many people would be there next Friday to help her protest, but she was going to try her best to get the whole town there. As she painted, she ignored the loud pop music coming from downstairs. Stephanie was having her annual Halloween party in the living room, which sounded like crazy fun, but in actuality, it was just a bunch of drama geeks eating peeled grapes and gossiping. An entirely worthless waste of a good Halloween night, in Amanda's opinion. She leaned back, and her hand hit the strip of duct tape Stephanie had stuck to the carpet, dividing their room in half. It sucked having to share a room with your older sister. Not that Stephanie was horrible. She was just a little self-absorbed, like most drama queens. Amanda had been born exactly 9 months after Stephanie, something her mother liked to bemoan about to her friends. "Yes, it is possible to get pregnant when you're breastfeeding," she'd say, to Amanda's horror. "Sheesh, Mom, TMI." Stephanie was tall and blonde and basically gobbled up all the good genetics, so when Amanda was born, all that was left was the stuff no one wanted. She was short, with mousy brown hair, which she wore long and straight down her back. In 2nd grade, they realized she couldn't see the blackboard, so she got glasses, another fun genetic trait passed down from her parents. Not that she remembered much about her father. He died when she was only 5. Amanda shifted so she could reach the other side of her sign. Almost done now. It was probably for the best that Stephanie got all the movie star qualities. Stephanie had been in all the school productions since her freshman year, priding herself on her excellent acting skills. She was going to graduate this spring and move to New York so she could star in the next big Broadway hit. Or wait tables for 10 years while she struggled to pay the rent. But everyone called Amanda cynical when she said that. She finished her sign and leaned it up against the wall so the paint could dry. Her worst nightmare would be to show up to stop the bulldozers and have no one else come. She could just imagine standing there by herself, crying. She hadn't yet told her mother the opera house was to be demolished. Her mother worked 60 hours a week and rarely watched television, so Amanda was sure she didn't realize the building would be gone soon. The thought crushed Amanda's heart. She had to save it. To save her mother the pain she would feel if she lost that last connection to her late husband. A noise came from the corner of the room, and she walked over to her hamster village. She used to just have a cage, but she'd added pipes and rooms to it, and now it resembled an elaborate hamster maze system. Phineas was running on his wheel again. He loved to get a good run going, then stop and hang on so the wheel tossed him upside down. He was a funny little guy. Ferb was asleep in his hamster bedding nest. Amanda reached into the treat bag and pulled out a sunflower seed. She pushed it through the cage bars, and Phineas stopped running on his wheel to go sniff it. Amanda pulled on her skinny jeans and tugged down her fitted black t-shirt. Cole would be here soon, and she had to get ready for the dance. Dressing in all black would make the last part of her costume truly amazing. She lifted the white fishing net she'd bought on Amazon and stuck her head and arms through the holes she'd cut out of the net. Empty water bottles, plastic bags, soda cans, and styrofoam cups hung from the net. It was her best Halloween costume yet. Last year she'd gone to the dance wearing a baby carrier with a chimpanzee doll in it, trying to bring awareness to the endangered mountain gorillas. She couldn't find a baby gorilla. People just thought she was dressed up as a teen mom with an odd baby. Epic fail. But this year her costume was clear. Stop throwing trash in the ocean. Amanda stood before the mirror and twisted her hair up in a messy bun. She figured that went well with garbage brought in from the sea. As she looked at herself in the mirror, the doorbell rang and a small rush of adrenaline ran through her veins. What was that about? It was just Cole. Sheesh. She hurried to slip into her Converse shoes, then opened the door. Cole stood there, wearing a white shirt with sailor stripes on it. It fit his muscular frame a little too well. A fluttery feeling started in her chest as she tried not to stare at him. "Are you going as a sailor?" He grinned. "I'm a fisherman. You're the net. I think we go well together." She smiled at how thoughtful Cole was. She knew he thought her costume was ridiculous, but it was kind of him to dress up in something complimentary. "We do," she said, smiling wider. He extended his elbow to her. "You ready?" She looped her hand through his arm. "I'm ready." The night air was chilly, but she couldn't exactly wear a coat over her costume. She ignored the stiff breeze and walked beside Cole. As she climbed into the car to sit, one of the milk jugs she'd glued to her net caught on the door and ripped her net. "Oh!" Cole bent his head down. "What happened?" Amanda sat shocked for a second, then burst out laughing. "I ripped my costume. I guess the hot glue weakened the net." Cole frowned. "Do you want to go glue it?" She pulled the carton completely off and tossed it into his back seat. "Nope, it's not that bad. Let's just go. I don't want to make you late for the dance." "Okay, as long as you're sure." She smiled. It was just how things went sometimes. "I'm sure." He climbed in the car and turned to her. "You look lovely with all that trash on you." His warm chuckle washed over her, making her insides melt. "Why, thank you. And you look—" Amanda stared at him. Dang, he looked hot. But she couldn't say that. She swallowed. "Nice." They'd stayed after school to decorate the gym, so Amanda knew what it would look like. But when they walked in, she still gasped a little. With the fluorescent bulbs off and the disco ball sending beams of light onto all the spiders they'd hung from the ceiling, it looked cooler than she'd thought. Paper streamers hung out from the middle of the room, and the stage was lit up with black lights. The DJ wore a skeleton outfit that glowed in the dark. "Want some punch?" Cole asked, rubbing his hands together. He seemed jumpier than normal. "Sure." She followed him over to the table and took a cup. The punch bowl must have had dry ice in it, because a fog of mist rose up and out of the bowl, looking freakishly cool. It tasted good. It had Sprite or something, so it bubbled. Cole drained his cup and tossed it in the recycle bin. A slow song came on. "Want to dance?" Those words sent a shiver through her, and she became nervous. "We just got here." "So?" Amanda wasn't sure why, but the thought of slow dancing with Cole sent a weird, wobbly feeling into her belly. It was disconcerting. They'd been friends of Destiny's for so long, it felt kind of odd to be at a dance with him alone. Not that she didn't like Cole, she liked him just fine. They just weren't usually alone together. She'd met him through Destiny, and so he'd always been her friend's friend. Lately, though, he was around much more than usual. She clutched her half-empty cup. "Let's find Destiny and Eli. I want to show them my costume." Cole nodded, and they weaved their way through the throngs of students in various costumes. Destiny had told her she was going as Catwoman, so she looked for leather pants and black pointy ears. Cole pointed at a long black cape. "There's Eli." Of course, he was Batman. Amanda approached them. "Hey, guys. Looks good in here, huh?" Destiny turned around, her eyes sparkling. Her costume was perfect for her. She looked flawless, as usual. Mr. B was right. That disco ball makes everything look cool. I thought so too. Amanda glanced around. And we've got a good turnout. Destiny nodded, then grabbed Eli's hand. Come on, I love this song. Let's dance. And once again, Amanda found herself standing in front of Cole, an awkwardness growing between them. I guess we should dance as well. She set her plastic cup down on a nearby table. Yeah. He smiled, and that wobbly feeling came back tenfold. Sure. He took her hand and pulled her onto the dance floor. He tried to put his arms around her, but the bottles and cans she'd glued to the net got in the way. It took him a few tries before he was able to pull her closer. A plastic sack crinkled between them. She tried not to laugh, but it became so humorous, she couldn't help it. Great costume idea there, Mandy, he said, using her nickname. Cole was the only one who ever called her that. She used to yell at him for it, but she'd kind of grown used to it. Dare she admit she even liked it? She laughed. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. So, how about that test tomorrow in weights class? What's that about? Amanda laughed harder. That's the stupidest thing I've heard. What is Ms. Leonard thinking? I think she's just tired of people taking the class to get an easy A. Whoever heard of a test in PE? She nodded and looked up at him. Cole shifted, his hand resting on her lower back. The warmth of his touch sent a trail of goosebumps over her skin, which didn't make any sense. She didn't want to think about what it might mean. You going to the game tomorrow? As soon as the words were out of her mouth, she wanted to slap herself. Cole didn't care about football, and neither did she. What was wrong with her? No. Do you have to work? He shook his head. No. I thought you worked on the weekends. I don't have steady hours, just when I'm needed. Interesting. Amanda had a vague notion that Cole had a job, but she had either forgotten where or had never asked. You work where again? He stiffened and evaded her gaze. I work for my father. Oh, where's that? His office is on 54th Street. She wasn't sure if he was being evasive on purpose or not. What company? It's a corporate company. You wouldn't know it. Wait. Amanda held up her hand. Wouldn't a corporate company be closed on the weekends? Yeah, but my father puts in extra hours. I help him out when he needs data entry or errands to be run. Things like that. Cole pulled her closer, and the plastic bag crinkled again. He chuckled. Maybe you can take off your net for the next dance? She was finding it hard to move around with it on. All right. As the slow song ended and a new one started up, Amanda slipped her net off and tossed it on a chair. Then she walked back to Cole. Better? He grinned and pulled her close. Her body pressed up against him, and her heartbeat sped up. Much, he said in her ear. Her glasses slipped down her nose, and she let go of him to push them back up in place. She was having a hard time concentrating. What had they been talking about again? Oh, right, where he worked. What's the company name? I'll look them up tonight. Cole ignored her question. You smell good. She frowned. What was the big deal? Why wouldn't he tell her where he worked? Just tell me. I don't want to. She huffed and pulled away from him. Why not? Because I don't want to ruin the evening. She stared up at him, confused. Telling me where you work will ruin the evening? Why? His face looked pained. He leaned down close to her. Do you trust me? You're using cheesy Disney movie lines on me now? Just let it go, all right? She held in a laugh. You do realize that's another cheesy Disney movie line? Cole didn't think it was funny, apparently, because he groaned. Let's talk about anything else, okay? He seemed really bothered by it, so she shrugged. Will you tell me after? Yes, after. Promise? Cole winced, but finally nodded. I promise. Chapter 2. Cole ignored the dread pooling in his stomach. Why did Amanda have to ask about his job? There were a zillion other things they could have talked about. What rotten luck he had. He should have guided the conversation. He could have stepped up to the plate and steered them onto safe topics. Why had he gotten all tongue-tied? He took in the smell of her hair and knew why. Because he liked her. A lot. And he wanted her to like him back. But as soon as she found out he was working for Asher Industries, he knew she would be crushed. He tried to ignore the crush he had on her, but every time he was near her, his skin would tingle and he would forget how to breathe properly. Crazy, right? He was hoping tonight might change things between them. He wanted to show her how he felt about her. But as he swayed to the music with her in his arms, his courage failed him. Even if he did tell her he liked her, she would hate him once the evening was over. Amanda shifted and looked up at him. I didn't know you could dance. What do you mean? Everyone else is just doing this little back and forth thing. You're actually doing some dance steps. Embarrassment heated his neck. My mom made me take ballroom dance lessons when I was growing up. Guess I slipped back into doing the foxtrot by accident. Sorry. Don't apologize, it's nice. She smiled at him. Teach me. Her words sent a thrill through him. She wanted to learn. Sure, he said, pulling her closer. He showed her the steps, then led her into the dance. As they moved to the music, she stepped on his foot. A laugh burst from her. He was starting to love that sound. Oops, sorry, she said. That's okay. You're picking it up. He spent the next 15 minutes teaching her how to do the dance steps. She seemed to get really into it, laughing when he did a fancy step. As they danced, the gym grew quite warm. Maybe it was all the bodies pressing in on them, or the exercise. Whatever it was, his palms started to get sweaty. He hoped Amanda didn't notice. When a fast song came on, she seemed disappointed. They walked to the table and she grabbed her punch cup. That was fun. I had no idea you knew all that stuff. What else is there about you that will surprise me? Her question seemed a little flirty, and his heart skipped a beat. He wanted to say something flirty back, but his mind went completely blank. I don't know. Besides your mysterious and probably illegal employment. She shot him a mysterious look. What else do I not know about you? He racked his brain for something intelligent to say. He blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. I play a mean game of poker. Amanda laughed at that. My sister and I used to play poker with her friends. I'd win every time. He raised one eyebrow. That sounds like a challenge. Maybe it is. She draped her net over her once again and gave him a smile. She looked cute, even with trash all over her. We'll have to play sometime. You're on. She tugged on her net. Is it hot in here? Thank goodness it wasn't just him. He was dying. Yes. Let's go outside. She started toward the doors. I need to catch my breath. Cole walked with her into the hallway where the music wasn't nearly as loud. You're right. Getting out of there was a good idea. She She pushed on the door, and the cool night air enveloped them as they walked outside. I kind of felt claustrophobic in there. Too many people. She fanned her face. Do you get that way around a lot of people? He didn't know that about Amanda. Her face turned red. Was she embarrassed? Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's not bad or anything, but sometimes I just have to get away. Is that weird? Cole had never seen Amanda act self-conscious before, but as they walked, she twisted her fingers together. He liked to see this side of her. It was vulnerable. He touched her shoulder. It's not weird. She turned the corner and walked along the sidewalk that ran adjacent to the street. It was a quiet, residential neighborhood. Do you have anything like that? A secret fear or odd thing about you? Sure. He shrugged. I guess. I mean, I hate flying. I've only been on an airplane once, but it freaked me out. Is that what you mean? Yeah. She looked up at him. I can handle flying, but if I see a spider, I'm done. He chuckled. A spider? I thought you loved all animals. I don't kill them, ever. I just have to get someone to take them outside. That's all. They give me the creeps. She shivered to show her point. Snakes and spiders don't bother me, but when I was a kid, I was scared of dogs. Amanda wrinkled her nose. Why? Did one attack you? No, they were just so full of energy. And they were loud. I didn't like the barking. I still don't love them. Interesting. They were silent for a moment while they walked. A few cars passed them by, and a group of kids in costume ran to houses on the other side of the street, collecting candy. Are you ever worried about the future? She was back to twisting her fingers together. No. He knew exactly what his future was going to look like. He would attend college, get a degree in business, then come back here to work for his father until he took over the company. It was all planned out for him. He didn't have much say in it. Why? Are you? She worried her lower lip. I sometimes wonder if I'll totally screw up my future. How so? I don't know. Like, I want to make a difference in the world. Do something really important, you know? But what if I waste my life? What if I do all these things but never make a difference? She kicked at a rock on the sidewalk. I just don't want to fail. Cole had never seen Amanda like this. She was always headstrong, moving forward with a purpose. He had never seen her hesitant before. He stopped and turned toward her. You won't fail. How do you know? What makes you so sure? He took her hands in his. Her skin was warm, soft. He swallowed. You have a purpose. I know you do. What if what I do never matters? She stared up at him, her brown eyes reflecting the light from the street lamp. It will matter. To me. Cole cringed at the cheesy line, sure that Amanda would call him out on it, but she didn't. She just smiled. That's sweet, but I want to make more of a difference, like the Opera House. I want to save it so future generations can enjoy the history within its walls. Cole frowned. Why was she bringing up the Opera House? Disappointment sank in his heart. He let go of her hands and shoved his fists in his pockets. If he agreed with her that the Opera House should be saved, she would be livid when she found out the truth, that he was helping his father with the demolition. He couldn't take her side no matter what. But maybe he could get her to see his side of things. That building is falling down. She stared at him. You've never understood, have you? Her voice was barely above a whisper. No, I don't. He turned from her, his skin turning cold. The building has been vacant for more than 2 decades. It's overrun with mice, and the wiring is faulty. It would take a lot of money to restore it, and it's sitting on a prime piece of real estate that could be used for something else." Amanda bristled. "Do you know what they're going to put there, Cole?" Of course he knew. He saw the plans. His father had been talking about it for the last 6 months. "Yeah?" he said, his voice low. "A parking garage." Amanda froze. "Wait, what? You knew that? How?" Their evening was ruined already. No sense in delaying the inevitable. "I work for Asher Industries. My father is Leonardo Asher." Amanda sucked in a breath. "Your father is the one behind this? He's the one destroying history?" "It's just a building." "Did you know Lily Foster sang in that opera house?" No, he did not. He didn't even know who Lily Foster was. He sighed. "No, but that building is falling apart, Mandy. The roof leaks, there's mold in the walls. It's a health hazard." She shoved his chest. "It could be restored." "And who is going to restore it?" She blinked, and he suddenly realized she was crying. Guilt swept through him. Dear heavens! Had he made her cry? Why was she so upset over an old building that was falling apart? She wiped at her cheeks. "Definitely not Asher Industries," she spat out. Cole felt like a jerk. He reached out to her, but she backed away from him. "Amanda, I think it's best if you take me home." He swallowed down the disappointment for a wasted evening. What had he been thinking, anyway? He knew she'd hate him when she found out who his father was, who he was. "All right." He followed Amanda as she strode down the sidewalk to the parking lot, her arms wrapped around her. When they neared his car, 3 figures stepped out of the shadows. Nikki and her gang. They were dressed as sexy cats with short skirts and drawn-on whiskers. Cole had heard they were now banned from the mall. Served them right for what they did. At least Destiny had recovered from what they'd tried to do to her. He and Amanda walked to the side to let them pass, but Nikki approached Amanda. "What a loser costume." Nikki looked her up and down. "Fitting." Cole grit his teeth and stepped between Amanda and the catty girls. If they were going to start something, he was going to be the one who ended it. "Leave her alone," he said, his words coming out more like a growl. Nikki sneered. "Hang out with trash and you'll eventually start smelling like it." "Better than what you smell like," he said. "Desperation." Nikki and her clan scoffed and walked off toward the school. Whatever they were up to was not any good. He watched until they disappeared into the building. When he turned back to open the car door for Amanda, he realized she was already in the car. He climbed in the driver's seat. Amanda wiped at her cheeks. She was crying again. He felt terrible. "Amanda," she blew out a breath. "Thank you for what you did back there." He swallowed. "You're welcome." He didn't know what else to say to her. He felt like a hole had been drilled through his chest. He sighed and cranked the ignition. They were both silent as he drove to her house, a small 2-story with a detached garage. He pulled into her driveway. He wanted to make it all better, wanted to tell her he understood why she wanted to save the opera house. But he didn't. And if he said anything else, it would just sound like platitudes. All he could think of was to apologize. "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too," she said. She got out of the car and walked into her house. He watched her retreating back. He'd totally messed up everything. And the worst part was he had to go back to the dance and sit there until it ended. He was on the cleanup committee. The committee he'd joined so he could spend more time with Amanda. Chapter 3. Amanda wiped at her eyes as she tossed her Halloween costume into the corner of her room. The glass bottles clinked against each other. She plopped down on her bed and let out a groan. Cole's father was the one knocking down the opera house. How could that be? And how could Cole not see the value in preserving history? She hated that she broke down and started crying in front of Cole. How stupid. Humiliating. He probably thought she was a complete fool. Her phone vibrated and she looked at the screen. It was Destiny. What happened? Where are you? Cole's sitting alone and he looks like his dog just died. The mental image of Cole sitting at the dance, depressed, made her feel guilty. But she couldn't stay at the dance with him, not when she was so emotional. She texted back, I had Cole take me home. Why? Because he is destroying the one thing I have to hold on to and he doesn't understand? She sighed. She couldn't say that. She went with a simpler answer. Because we had a fight. OMG, girl, what about? Amanda didn't want to get into it. Ask Cole. I'm going to bed. That bad, huh? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm probably depressing you. It's okay, girl. You know I love you. I'll talk with you tomorrow at school. Love you too. Amanda plugged her phone in and climbed into her pajamas. The music from her sister's party still thrummed through the walls, and it was only 9 o'clock. She probably had to listen to it for another couple of hours before her sister would kick her friends out. She laid back on her pillow and tried not to think about the dance, about Cole. The night had started out so well, and she had totally screwed everything up. Cole unhooked the fishing line from the ceiling and dropped the spider into the plastic tub sitting on the floor by his ladder. He tried to stay at the dance but wasn't in the mood, so he'd ended up wandering around Rockford until midnight when the dance got over. Destiny and Eli came into the gym, holding hands. Cole, she said, there you are. We've been looking all over for you.
Don't worry, I wouldn't ditch you guys. I said I'd help clean up, so here I am.
We weren't worried about the cleanup, Eli said, putting down a streamer.
We were worried about you.
What happened? I texted Amanda, but she won't tell me anything except that you guys had a fight. Destiny pulled another ladder over to the middle of the room. Cole didn't want to talk about it.
She's right, we had a fight. I took her home. End of story.
What was the fight about? Destiny asked.
Stupid stuff.
Cole grabs another spider. His grip crushed the styrofoam and made a crunching noise. Destiny's eyebrows rose. Geez, you don't have to destroy spiders over it.
Sorry.
He ducked his head sheepishly and tossed the mess into the bin.
Did you kiss her?
Eli wiggled his eyebrows. Cole scoffed.
No. She was too busy being upset at me because I don't see why we can't tear down that old building.
Destiny shot him a look. Why don't you just support her in trying to save the building? Is that too much to ask? Yeah. That would make his father livid if he stood up to him and told him he was against the parking structure. He might as well disown himself and start collecting coins on the street corner.
I can't. My father is the one knocking down the opera house.
Destiny sucked in a breath, and Eli whistled.
Man, that sucks,
Eli said.
Yeah.
That was an understatement. Eli gave him a thoughtful look.
You like her, don't you? I mean, like her?
Cole had never admitted it to anyone before, so the question felt a bit invasive, but he nodded anyway.
Yeah?
She likes you too, Destiny said as she climbed down her ladder to move it to a different spot.
Not right now, she doesn't.
Cole stretched to reach a streamer. She just gets all into her causes. It's not you she dislikes, Destiny said. Cole shrugged, not wanting to get into an argument, but not really believing her. Eli picked up a pile of streamers, the load in his arms looking like he'd just mugged a mummy.
You just need to make more of an effort. Spend more time with her. She'd get over the hang-ups if she admitted to herself that she liked you as a person.
Destiny nodded. Yeah, that's a good idea. You should sign up for the fun feline run on Saturday. Amanda's gathered up a ton of pledges, and all the money goes to help the local animal shelter. She'd think you were great if you join in the run.
He hated running, but if it got him on Amanda's good side, he'd do it. Good idea.
Eli stuffed the wad of streamers into the trash can.
Don't give up, man. From what I've seen, you two are perfect for each other.
Cole made a face.
Are you serious? Yeah, you guys totally need a makeout session.
Eli laughed. Cole didn't respond. He had to admit, he'd been thinking about kissing Amanda quite a lot lately. Chapter 4. Amanda sat down in her second period algebra class, the only class she had with Cole. She was dreading seeing him after last night's horrible mess of a dance. She didn't want to call it a date. It wasn't a date at all. Just two people who needed to be there going together. At least, that's what she'd decided it was. She had totally made a fool of herself. He couldn't help who his father was. She had been so stupid, and now she dreaded seeing him. Cole entered the room. He wore a polo shirt and jeans, his usual attire. He had a way of pulling off that look like no one else could. His gaze connected with hers. She looked down to her desk, embarrassed she'd been ogling him. He walked to his normal seat behind her. Usually, he greeted her. Today, he didn't say anything, which was fine with her. She didn't want to talk to him. Didn't want to acknowledge the embarrassing display from last night. She waited for the teacher to come into the room and get the class started, but the seconds ticked by and the teacher didn't come in. Where was he? He was never late to class. She grew uncomfortable ignoring Cole. She always turned around and talked to him. It was obvious she was ignoring him. The awkwardness grew until she couldn't stand it anymore, and she finally turned around. Hey. He raised his eyebrows at her.
Hey.
Listen, about last night. He raised a hand.
It's okay. I understand.
You understand? What did he mean? There was no way he could understand. He didn't even let her apologize.
Yes, you are passionate about all kinds of things, and He swallowed. I can't share in those passions.
Can't or won't? Amanda didn't mean to say it. It just came out.
Can't.
She held in a scoff. He was blaming his unwillingness to even look at her side of things on something out of his control? What sense did that even make? I don't believe you. Heat crept up her neck and she swiveled around. Why did she say that? She was such an idiot. Was she trying to pick another fight? After a minute, she heard him shift in his seat. He tugged on her ponytail. It was a juvenile thing to do, but that was Cole. She turned and glared at him. What?
I'm sorry I upset you. Seems like I'm doing that a lot lately.
He hesitated like he was going to say something else, but then changed his mind. He had upset her, but she didn't want to be a jerk about it. I'm sorry, too.
Can we call a truce?
What kind of truce? He shrugged.
You ignore that my father is the one knocking down that little opera house, and I'll try not to be like, oh, hey, cool new parking garage. Then we can maybe get along for a change.
She swallowed down the urge to sock him in the throat. It wasn't a little opera house. It was so much more than that to her. It was one of the only places in the town which made her feel closer to her father. But she couldn't tell him that. He wouldn't understand. How about you tell your father where to stuff it? She hissed, and turned back around. Geesh, she did it again. Why did she allow her anger to surge like that? Mr. Harrison, the algebra teacher, entered and held up his hand.
Pass your homework up to the front of the class, please,
he said. Amanda tried to calm herself down. She didn't want to start crying in math class. How lame was that? She tried to think of something else, anything else. Her phone vibrated, and she welcomed the distraction. She pulled it out and kept it hidden in her lap so the teacher wouldn't see. It was a text from an unknown number. How odd. She opened it. Hey. That was it. Just a hey from someone she didn't know. She texted back, Who is this? It took a second for the person to respond. They typed for a minute, then their answer appeared. I go to your school. Amanda stared at the words. She probably should feel creeped out, but kids at school played funny pranks on their phones all the time. It was probably just some kid messing with her. The teacher wasn't paying attention, so she texted back. Who are you? The answer took a minute before it came in. A friend of Destiny's. She swiveled in her chair to look at Cole, immediately convinced it was him, but he sat there staring at his algebra book, both hands visible on the desk. Maybe it wasn't him.
Amanda, care to answer the question?
Mr. Harrison said, his hand on his hip. Crap, called out by the teacher. She swallowed and quickly scanned the board for a clue. Nope, she had no idea. 3?
No, please pay attention.
Sorry. She inwardly groaned. There was nothing worse than having the teacher point out to everyone in the class that you were messing around and not listening. She was tempted to put her phone away, but it vibrated again and she was too curious not to look at it.
Sorry, am I getting you into trouble?
It was Cole. She turned around again to catch him texting her, but he was in the same position. His hands on the desk, his head in his algebra book. She grunted and turned back around. Maybe it was someone else in the class? She subtly tried to look around, but she didn't see anyone on their phone. She scooched down in her chair and tried to look like she was paying attention while texting back. Yes, you are. Are you in my algebra class? She took another glance around before staring at Mr. Harrison and pretending that she was listening to his riveting lecture on linear relations. Again, she couldn't see anyone with a phone, but it's possible they were hiding theirs in their lap like she was. It took a few minutes for her phone to notify her of another text. She made sure Mr. Harrison was looking at another student before she checked it. Maybe. This was very intriguing. Who was it? Probably some kid in her class as bored as she was. She wanted to know who it was. It had become a challenge now. I'm going to take that as a yes. Tell me your name. The teacher droned on as she waited for a response. And while she waited, she tried to see who might be on their phone. A couple of people caught her attention as she scrutinized the other students. One girl kept reaching under her desk for something. Another boy was digging in his book bag every so often. And she did catch one other person on their phone, but it was Nikki, and she was definitely not a friend of Destiny's. Besides, she was texting constantly and no other texts had come through. Until her phone vibrated, almost scaring her. She took a peek. Guess. Oh, that was so unfair. She tried to think of a response. Okay, I get to ask a few questions. She still thought maybe Cole was messing with her, so she waited a second before turning quickly around to see if she could catch him texting her back. But his hands were on the desk. Unfortunately, Mr. Harrison cleared his throat at her.
Miss Blake, would you care to tell the class why you can't seem to sit still in your chair?
Sorry, I had an itch. She rubbed her back against the chair and a few students laughed. Unfortunately, her phone slipped from her lap and landed with a clunk on the tile floor. Mr. Harrison narrowed his eyes at her.
Is that your phone?
He walked to her and held out his hand.
Give it to me.
She panicked. But
give it to me now or you'll get detention.
Mr. Harrison looked like he meant business. The little vein in his neck was throbbing. Okay, she said, handing him her phone. She did not want to get detention over something so stupid.
Thank you. I'll give it back to you after class.
Amanda scooted down in her chair, embarrassment heating her entire body. She hoped the person who texted her really wasn't in this class. Chapter 5. Cole didn't mean to get Amanda into trouble. He was just goofing off, trying to find a way to lighten things between them. He'd totally forgotten he'd purchased an alias number for his phone last year when he was getting some odd phone calls and wanted to try to figure out who they were coming from. As he grabbed a tray and stood in his lunch line, he thought about what he'd done. Using the alias number to text Amanda hadn't occurred to him until she had looked like she wanted to rip his head off. He wasn't even sure what he'd done this time to make her angry. It most likely wasn't going to get better until after the opera house was demolished, and she had time to get over it. He picked up a sub sandwich and added it to his tray. He was hungry today, so he also grabbed a banana, a yogurt, and a cheesecake for dessert. Amanda walked into the cafeteria, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. She didn't look over at him, though. Instead, she headed straight for their table and started talking with Destiny. It had been easy to fool Amanda. When she'd sat with her back to him, he'd slipped his phone out of his pocket and held it under the desk. After he hit send, he put his arms back up on his desk. Using the alias number always delayed the text a bit, so by the time Amanda swiveled around to look at him, he was concentrating on his algebra. Or at least he looked like he was. At first, he was just messing with her. But after he chatted with her a bit, he realized talking to her anonymously might be a great way to get to know her better without her putting up walls. At least he could try. And if it didn't work out, he could just stop texting her and let her be curious who it was. He paid for his lunch and walked over to their usual table. Amanda didn't look at him. Figured. He set his tray down by Eli and plopped into a chair.
Hey.
Eli glanced at the girls, standing by their table. They had started whispering.
How's it going?
Eli asked, sticking his fork into his lasagna and smiling like he'd just won the lottery.
Not good.
Then he lowered his voice as well. He shook his head.
I just don't get it. It's a stupid rundown building. Why is it so important to her?
I don't know, man.
I can't wait until this whole thing is over.
He took a bite from his sub sandwich. It kind of tasted like it had been made yesterday. The bread was chewy and the cheese a little hard. Nothing was going his way today.
So, what's up with you? You look happy.
Eli's smile widened.
Sorry, I don't mean to be weird. It's just that my mom got a raise. A big one. She says we can start to look for a house. Seriously? That's great. Yeah, and if we can find one with a big enough yard, I can have my dog back. Where's he? With my dad in Cali. That's awesome, man.
Cole had always wanted a dog, but his father wouldn't let him get one.
They're too messy, he'd say. They'll scratch the hardwood and chew up the furniture.
The girls went to get in line. Cole got an idea. He leaned closer to Eli.
Hey, will you help me out with something? Sure. I texted Amanda anonymously to mess with her, but I think she suspects it's me. Will you text her for me right now so if she looks, I can be sitting here eating and talking to you? You've got your back to her, so she won't be able to tell.
Eli got a strange look on his face.
How can you text her anonymously? Doesn't she know your number? I used an alias number. What's that? It's like an app. It makes it look like I'm texting from a different number. Will you send something to her for me? Okay.
Cole pulled out his phone and unlocked it, then slid it across the table. Eli grabbed it and put it below the table.
What do you want me to say? Ask her if she thought of any questions yet.
Eli typed and then hit send. Then he posed as if he was listening to Cole, his hands above the table. From his vantage point, Cole could see both Eli and the girls in line. He picked up his sub sandwich and took a bite, watching the girls behind Eli. Amanda chatted with Destiny, but then swiveled quickly to look at him as she pulled her phone out of her pocket. She scanned the lunchroom, then showed the text to Destiny.
What's she doing? Did she get it? She's texting back. Just a second. Using the alias makes it delayed a bit.
Eli shoved in the last of his lasagna and nodded.
Okay.
A few seconds later, he looked down at Cole's phone.
She answered. What does it say?
Just as he suspected, both the girls started scrutinizing the people in the lunchroom. Eli grinned at him.
Are you male or female?
Cole chuckled and puffed out his chest.
Definitely male.
He grinned and pointed.
Type that in. Will do.
Eli was quite good at typing with one hand while making it look like he was still talking to Cole.
Very impressive. I once texted during an entire biology lecture while sitting in the front row. The teacher never suspected.
Cole wasn't sure that was a brag-worthy feat, but he nodded and chuckled anyway. Amanda's gaze still swept the room. Cole leaned back in his chair and wiped his face with his napkin. This was perfect. Amanda would never suspect him now. Amanda must have gotten the text because she and Destiny crowded around her phone. They both looked at Cole, and he gave them a little chin motion, acknowledging them. The line moved, and they both grabbed trays. He didn't think he'd get a text back anytime soon.
Okay, they're getting food. Give me back my phone.
Eli slipped it back to him, and he stuck it in his back pocket so Amanda could see it when he stood up. This was too easy. Chapter 6. Amanda sat next to Destiny and picked up her milk carton. The secret texter was a guy. Why did that make her even more curious? After careful study, she knew it wasn't Cole. Her secret texter sent her a message while she was watching him, and he never got his phone out. But who else could it be? Destiny denied giving out her number to anyone, and she looked genuinely shocked. So Amanda believed her. She wouldn't lie, they'd been friends too long. Eli put his arm around Destiny and kissed her temple. It looked like he did it almost thoughtlessly, and it touched Amanda. He really did care about her. It was sweet. She opened her milk carton and took a drink while she fiddled with her phone. She had to think of something else to ask him, something that might give her a clue. She thought of one and sent off a text. Are you a junior or a senior? She ate her lunch as she waited for the answer to come, but she got no response. Whoever it was must be busy. She looked around the lunchroom, trying to guess who it might be, but no one came to mind. Maybe because she didn't have a goal to be popular, so she never really got to know many students. That was more Destiny's thing. Popularity. She was more into social causes. Cole pointed to her sub sandwich.
Is your sub as stale as mine?
He seemed to be making an effort to make peace. She wasn't the kind of person who would hate on someone if they were offering an olive branch. She picked hers up and took a bite. It had been sitting in a refrigerator, but it wasn't gross. It's not bad. I mean, they never taste as good as you think they will, but it's fresh. He made a face.
I think I got a leftover one.
Yuck. That sucks. Eli motioned to Amanda.
What are you doing this weekend?
I have the feline fun run tomorrow to raise money for the animal shelter. This would be her 3rd year participating. She loved that it took place in the fall when the weather was getting crisp outside. Running in the summer heat was never fun to her. Plus, the smells of fall always made her think of pumpkin pie baking with her mother.
Cool,
Eli said.
What are you doing tonight? Any plans?
He gave Cole a pointed look, which Cole ignored. What was going on between them? I want to go see the paper pirate. Destiny leaned forward. Me too. We totally should see it together. Eli pouted. What? I mean, you can come too if you want. Destiny backpedaled.
Sure, but what kind of movie is it anyway? Sounds like origami. Boring.
Amanda couldn't believe it. He'd never heard of the book. Seriously? You haven't read The Paper Pirate? It's like the greatest fantasy novel of all time. She's not kidding, Destiny said. It's awesome. I can't believe you've never heard of it.
What's it about?
Eli asked. Teen gets sucked into another world, has to defeat the evil overlord that rules there. Pretty much like most other fantasy novels, only the teen in this book is like the perfect guy, Destiny said. And he's played by Brandon Travers, so... She fanned herself and Amanda laughed.
Hey,
Eli said, giving Destiny a dirty look.
You can't say that right in front of me.
Amanda snorted.
I'm pretty sure even you know that Brandon Travers is hot. Hotter than Shawn Mendes.
Destiny blew out a breath and groaned. Oh no, not this again.
What?
Amanda didn't know what they were talking about. Eli gets jealous if I talk about famous people. Destiny rolled her eyes, but there was a hint of a smile on her lips.
Talk about?
Eli said, his face incredulous.
You mean drool over, right? Why else would you pick him to spend the day with?
Destiny laughed. Like I'd ever really get to spend the day with Shawn Mendes. Amanda stared at them both. They were arguing, but in one of those cutesy, almost makes you want to throw up kind of ways. You guys are crazy. Do you want to come to the movies with us or what? Destiny asked Eli.
Yes, but no ogling Brandon Travers. I can't stand the guy.
He wrinkled his nose, like he'd stuck his nose in a dumpster and some fresh, disgusting smell was wafting up. There might be some ogling going on. I mean, look at the guy. Amanda pulled his picture up on her phone and held it up. Destiny laughed and Eli just grunted.
Put that picture away. There's 100 hormonal girls in this room.
And they're all probably going to see the Paper Pirate tonight, Destiny said with a giggle hidden behind her voice.
Why is it called that anyway? Eli scowled. Paper Pirate. What even is that?
It's because the world isn't actually real. It's...
Wait!
Cole shouted, interrupting Destiny and raising his hand. He'd been unusually quiet during their conversation.
Don't spoil it. What if I go see it? I don't want to know the ending.
You're right, Destiny said. I won't give it away. Just know there's a good reason it's called that. Eli nudged Cole.
Come with us. We could all go, as a group.
As a group? Like what they were supposed to do for the dance? Amanda couldn't help herself. She frowned. Like that worked so well last time, she said under her breath as she picked up her milk. The guys can sit together, Destiny said, looping her arm through Amanda's. That way we can ogle all we want, and they can eat all the popcorn. How did she get roped into going to the movies with them? She wasn't sure exactly how that happened, but she nodded. All right.
Great,
Eli said.
We can meet at the theater at 6.
Amanda saw a look exchanged between Eli and Destiny, and knew tonight was going to be a setup. She just hoped Cole could handle an evening without being a jerk. Chapter 7. What was Eli trying to do? It was obvious Amanda knew the whole movie thing was a setup. He could see it on her face. She wasn't fooled. Cole climbed into his car and tossed his backpack in the passenger seat. At least it was Friday, and he had the weekend to try to figure out how to set things right with her. He pulled his phone out of his backpack. He hadn't had a chance to answer her question yet. The rest of his classes had been too involved, and he would have gotten caught. But he sent her a quick text now.
Junior, but that's all the questions you get.
As he drove home, his phone alerted him to 2 more texts. He was dying to see what they said, but he didn't check them as he drove. He didn't want to get into an accident. But as soon as he pulled into his driveway and cut the engine, he grabbed his phone to look. What? No fair. How am I supposed to guess? How do I even know you go to my school? Cole smiled as he replied.
Knowing I got you into trouble in algebra wasn't enough?
Could have been a lucky guess. He tried to think of something that would prove he went to Rockford High.
The mascot is an eagle.
She sent him a frowny emoji. Anyone could look that up.
What if I tell you what you were wearing today?
She didn't answer for a few seconds, and he panicked.
I'm sorry, that came out way creepier than I meant it. Sheesh, I really am not a stalker.
Are you sure? Because my mom owns a gun.
You are totally bluffing right now, aren't you? Because from what I've seen, you're a pacifist. You wouldn't hurt a fly.
He stopped there because if he mentioned anything specific, she would begin to suspect him again. And he couldn't have that. She took a minute to reply. You must know me better than I know you. I can't decide if that's creepy or endearing.
Please choose endearing.
Cole paused, not sure if he should type the next thing he was thinking or not. Finally, after waffling, he did it quickly and sent it off before he could change his mind.
I've had a crush on you for a while now.
And you won't tell me who you are? Another frowny emoji accompanied that question. He took in a deep breath. He did want to tell her, but then the whole thing would be ruined. He sighed and answered her.
I'm nervous.
Fair enough. I'd probably be nervous too.
Maybe we can just talk for a little while?
Cole hoped that didn't sound too desperate. Sure. If we get to know each other better, maybe you'll feel more comfortable opening up to me. That sounded like a good plan to him.
Okay.
He typed as he got out of his car. He walked through the garage and entered the house. He punched in the security code into the system so an alarm wouldn't go off. They lived in the only gated community in Rockford, but his father was a bit paranoid about security, so they had extra precautions. Oh man, I can't go into my bedroom! Amanda sent him a crying emoji. He jogged up the stairs to his bedroom, tossed his backpack on the floor, and sat down at his desk to turn on his computer.
Why not?
My sister is filming her vlog. How did Cole not know Amanda's sister had a vlog? He wasn't even sure he knew she had a sister. Maybe vaguely he had known at one time, but he'd forgotten. He was instantly curious about it.
Your sister has a vlog? What's it called?
Stephanie's Tirades About the Movie Industry. Oh, you mean the title she calls it? Stephanie's Corner. Cole typed the name into his computer, and quite a few websites came up. He added vlog to the search, and a girl that looked like a blonde Amanda came up on his screen.
LOL. I take it she reviews movies?
Yep, if you can call it that. She loves going to the movies, but hates every one of them. It's a very strange dichotomy. I stopped trying to figure her out long ago.
I'll watch a few of her episodes. Are you on any of them?
Oh, heavens no. 1,000 times no. The camera doesn't love me. Cole shifted in his chair and looked at Amanda's sister on the screen. It totally could be Amanda in a blonde wig. What was she talking about?
I'm pretty sure your sister is an exact clone of you with lighter hair.
Ha 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 ha. So not right. You must need glasses. This was the second time he'd seen Amanda act self-conscious over the last couple of days. It was odd to him. She was always so self-assured. Maybe under all that bravado, she was just as unsure of herself as the rest of the teenage population.
I see you just fine.
He wanted to tell her how much he loved her almond-shaped eyes that hid a smile when she was amused, or the way her auburn hair looked so silky soft he wanted to touch it, or how he loved how fiercely loyal she was to her friends. But he held back. He already sounded super stalkerish just saying he had a crush on her. He didn't want to freak her out even more. It took Amanda a few seconds to respond. But not in a creepy way, right? Like you're not looking at me right now, are you?
Oh, geesh. I'm watching your sister's live vlog. And by the way, you're right. She hates the movies. She's totally trashing Brandon Travers and everything he did in The Paper Pirate right now.
Don't tell me what she says. I'm going to go see that tonight, and I don't want any spoilers.
I wouldn't dream of spoiling it for you. I should probably shut off her vlog because I am going to see it too.
Amanda sent a wide-eyed emoji. There's only one theater in Rockford. It will kind of be like we're watching the movie together. Cole let out a laugh. She had no idea how right she was.
Hey, yeah, you're right. We should chat afterwards. Tell each other how we liked it.
Good idea. I'll text you when I get home. He smiled. Maybe real-life Amanda didn't like him right now, but phone Amanda liked him just fine. If that's what it took to get her to see he wasn't a terrible guy, he was okay with that.
Deal.
Chapter 8. Amanda stood in line with Destiny, the guys behind them. Everyone and their dog was at the theater to see The Paper Pirate. It was a good thing they got there early. They stepped up to the counter and purchased tickets and a large bucket of popcorn. When the guy handed Amanda the bucket, Cole grabbed it before she could reach for it.
I'll do the butter.
Rude much? She called after him. He just shrugged at her and gave her a cocky grin.
I like to do the butter.
She turned to Destiny. What was that about? I don't know, but just forget it. He's just eager to get his hands on the popcorn. Guys are always hungry. Yeah, maybe. Whatever. Cole was your typical type A personality. He liked to be the one in charge. That's probably what would make him successful one day. He'd be in charge of a multi-billion-dollar company, and she'd be... The uneasy feeling came back. She wasn't sure what she'd end up doing. What if she failed at putting together a successful nonprofit organization? What if she got stuck flipping hamburgers the rest of her life? They filed into the theater, and Destiny grabbed the first seat, making everyone else have to practically climb over her legs. Amanda sat next to her. "What's up?" "What?" "Why didn't you go down the row?" "I drank a bottle of water before we left. I'm sure I'm going to have to pee within the first half of the movie." Destiny pointed to the door. "I didn't want to have to climb over everyone to get out." "Oh, okay." Eli sat down on the far end, forcing Cole to sit beside Amanda. "Oh, right. Like that wasn't obvious. Real nice, guys." She rolled her eyes. The previews started up. She reached for the popcorn, and her fingers touched Cole's. A zing of electricity shot over her skin, and she pulled her hand back. Destiny and Eli thought they were so clever. He leaned closer to her and whispered, "Sorry, here, have some." He held the popcorn bucket closer to her. "Thanks." She grabbed a handful and popped one in her mouth. The buttery flavor was delicious, and the salt was perfect too. Not too much, but still enough that it enhanced the flavors. But the last thing she wanted to do was compliment him on it. Not after he'd grabbed it away from her like a Nazi. No matter how good it was, she wasn't going to admit it to him. Cole shifted. "I get kind of OCD when it comes to putting on the butter and salt. I kind of have this system to putting it on. Sorry if I offended you." "No, I like it when guys manhandle my bucket of popcorn away from me. It's endearing." She hoped the sarcasm came through her whisper. "Yeah, I know I have a problem. I'm sorry. Next time you can do the popcorn." "What makes you think there's going to be a next time?" "After tasting my popcorn, you'll be craving to eat it again next week." He gave her a smug grin. He was probably right, but she wasn't going to tell him that. She huffed. "Don't talk. We're watching a movie." "It's just the previews. Everyone talks during the previews." "So not true." Amanda hissed at him. "Shh." Cole pointed to the screen. "It's a movie about a girl and her mop. What can be interesting about that?" Amanda held back a giggle. "She's cleaning the floor and dancing. She wants to be a famous singer someday." "Then why are they showing us 20 minutes of her and her mop?" He was right. She was still dancing with the mop. It didn't look like a very good movie, or rather, someone was a little self-absorbed when they put together the trailer. "Hush, I want to listen." Cole was silent for a moment while the girl with the mop got rejected 1,000 times. "She's not even that good. I'd reject her too." Amanda elbowed him. "I think this is a true story, and you're totally slinging mud all over it." "I just want the pirates to come on." "The paper pirate is not about actual—" "Hush!" Cole said, giving her a pointed look. "I'm trying to listen." "Oh my gosh, you're such a dork." An older lady behind her leaned forward and shushed them really loud. Cole slid down in his chair and hid his face. Amanda pinched her lips together and tried not to laugh, but couldn't help it. Cole's shoulders shook and she realized he was having a laughing fit as well. "What's so funny?" Destiny asked. "Nothing," Amanda managed to choke out. Cole gained his composure and sat up again. As the movie started, he leaned over and whispered, "Shh," which made her giggle all over again. Twice during the movie, she caught Cole stretching and she thought he was going to do that stupid move where the guy subtly puts his arm around the girl. But that was a dumb thought because he didn't do that. And she didn't want him to anyway, right? She totally wasn't into him that way. Even though watching the movie with him wasn't horrible. She kind of liked poking him when something funny came on the screen. He had a wheeze to his laugh, which made her think of some dog cartoon. She enjoyed it when he left. When the movie ended, they all filed out into the mall. Destiny got a weird look on her face. "Hey, Cole, do you mind taking Amanda home? Eli wants to spend a little time with me. Would that be okay?" As she talked, she walked backwards toward the door as if she was going to turn and take off any second.
"Sure," Cole said.
Destiny grinned. "Thanks. You don't mind, do you, Amanda?" But she didn't wait for an answer. She bolted out the door. Amanda rolled her eyes. Could they be more obvious? Cole chuckled.
"They were trying pretty hard."
"Hopefully you don't mind. I should have suspected something when Destiny insisted she pick me up."
"It's no big deal."
He placed his hand on the small of her back. It might have annoyed her any other time, but tonight, for some reason, it felt good. Like a warm blanket wrapped around on a cold evening. She liked the feeling. They walked to his car in the parking lot. He started the engine and turned out of the parking lot.
"What did you think of the movie?"
He glanced at her as they drove. The book is always better, but they did a good job with what they had to work with. I'm glad they didn't add a ton of CGI stuff in. That always looks so fake. He nodded.
"I agree."
He turned down Main Street and Amanda groaned. "Don't take Main this time of night. Traffic is always so backed up. It will take forever." Cole didn't say anything as he slowed for the cars ahead of him. They inched along as cars tried to back out of the street parking spaces into the heavy traffic. After a few minutes, they were right in front of the Opera House. Amanda narrowed her eyes at him. "Did you take this way so you could show me how needed a parking garage is here?" He looked at her, his eyes pleading.
"You have to admit there's a problem downtown on busy nights. Everyone parks on the street, making it impossible for cars to get through."
Amanda couldn't believe he'd turned down Main Street, knowing it would take forever to get through, just as an object lesson. She turned from him, unable to speak, her throat closing up. What a jerk move.
"Mandy,"
he said softly. He put his hand on hers. Her body reacted to his warm touch as waves of electricity coursed through her. Stupid body. It didn't know what a meanie Cole was being. How insensitive. If he only knew what that building meant to her. But she didn't want to tell him, not while he was being this way. She pulled her hand away from him. "Just take me home," she whispered. It took 10 more minutes of sitting in traffic before he was able to turn off Main Street and head toward her house. When she got home, she went to her room and climbed into bed. She didn't want to think about Cole anymore. There was only one person she wanted to talk to. She pulled out her phone and texted her anonymous texter. Chapter 9. Cole stretched out on his bed, his phone in his hand. Part of the evening had gone well. He'd managed to screw things up in the beginning with the popcorn bucket. Stupid of him. He was just used to doing the popcorn because his father was low salt, low fat, and never put anything extra on it. It then tasted like styrofoam, and he couldn't sit through a movie with that tasteless garbage. He'd gotten in the habit of grabbing the bucket and doing it himself. Only he didn't think when he did that to Amanda. And then he couldn't give it back to her. She would have thought he was insane. So he tried to play it off as just his thing, which was idiotic. But after a while, she seemed to settle down about that. They'd gotten shushed by that old lady, which made them both crack up. It was a shared laugh. It bonded them. At least he'd thought it had. But then he had to turn down Main Street. He hadn't done it on purpose, but it did prove his point nicely. He should have apologized right then, told her he hadn't meant to. But instead, he thought maybe she would agree that a parking structure was needed. That didn't work. How did he manage to mess that up? Eli had set it up perfectly. But for some reason, he always managed to make Amanda mad at him. He stared at his phone, wondering if it was too late to text her as the anonymous guy. Before he could type anything in, a text from her came through. "You awake?" It was stupid how happy seeing those words made him.
Yes?
Good. I was hoping you would be. Did you go to the movie tonight?
Yes.
It was good, right? Tell me you loved it, because if you hated it, I don't know if we can still be friends. Cole chuckled and typed in a reply.
I loved it.
Yay! I knew you were a soulmate. He let those words wash over him for a second. They felt good. Another text came through. I only have a few minutes to chat before my bedtime.
You have a bedtime?
He sent her a funny face emoji after that comment, the one with the tongue hanging out. Self-imposed. I'm running a race tomorrow. I can't stay up all night.
I heard about that race. It's to help the animal shelter, right?
Yes, I've participated in it the last 2 years. It's a great cause.
I agree. Do you have a pet?
2 hamsters. I've wanted a dog for forever, but my sister is allergic. She inserted a frown. Cole felt her pain. He begged his father when he was in 5th grade to get him a dog. It was all he wanted for Christmas. No matter how much he begged, his father refused.
At least you have a good excuse why you can't have a dog. I can't have a dog because my parental unit doesn't want the mess. That's lame, right?
Totally lame.
What kind of dog would you get, if you could get one?
I would get a Papillon or a Maltese.
You like the small dogs? They're cute, but I want something more substantial, like a Great Dane or a Doberman.
His neighbor growing up had a Doberman. He'd pet the dog through the fence. He even figured out how to play catch with him by throwing sticks over the fence. He played with that dog more than his friends, probably. My friend had a St. Bernard. Nicest dog I've ever met. You should totally get a dog when you move out on your own. Only a year and a half away from that, right?
Except I'll be in a college dorm then. Probably can't have a dog until after I graduate.
You're right. That stinks. What college are you going to? Cole didn't think he'd ever mentioned to Amanda what college he was going to apply to. It was probably safe to tell her the truth.
Stanford? What about you?
I don't know. Isn't that terrible? I'm a junior. I should know what college I'm going to apply for, right? At the dance, Amanda had expressed some fear of the future. He hadn't thought much about it, but maybe her fear wasn't so much about what will happen, but fear of the unknown.
It's not terrible. You have time to look at the choices and make a decision. And you can apply for more than one college. Me, I can't really do that.
Why not? Cole wasn't sure why he'd said that. Maybe because he was a bit frustrated with his own future? Maybe because he wasn't allowed to talk about it with his father. And maybe because sometimes he felt trapped and had no one who understood. He probably should make a joke of it and move on, but something kept him from doing that.
My life is planned out for me. I have to go to Stanford because that's where my father went. He would fall over dead if I defied his wishes.
He's controlling?
That's an understatement.
I'm sorry. That must feel horrible.
I'm not allowed to feel horrible.
Cole sent the last text, then decided their discussion was getting way too deep, and decided to lighten the mood.
Wow, sorry. That was a real downer. I didn't mean to depress you.
Her answer came back fast. Don't worry, you didn't depress me. You have a controlling parent. While mine isn't that way, I can understand how that might make you feel. Don't think you can't be real with me. I want you to be real." Cole wasn't sure what to say to that, so he just typed,
Okay.
"Does your father control other aspects of your life too?
Pretty much every aspect.
Even what you'll study in college?" Cole shifted. He wasn't sure if talking about this was a great idea anymore. He was starting to feel uncomfortable, but he'd started it. He couldn't exactly abandon the conversation.
Especially what I'll study in college.
"So your father has your entire life planned out the way he wants it?
Yes.
And what would you want to be if you could erase everyone else and follow your dreams?" Cole had never told another living soul what he was passionate about, and he wasn't sure he could tell Amanda, even if he wanted to. Because he was not that person. He was his father's son, the billionaire-to-be. It's who everyone saw, and that's who he had to be. He took in a breath and let it out slowly. Before he could think of a response, she texted again. "Hey, are you still there?"
Yeah, I'm here.
"Then tell me, what do you want to be when you grow up?" She ended it with a silly face emoji. He decided that honesty was the best policy.
I don't know if I can tell you. It's kind of stupid.
"I won't make fun of you, I swear."
No, really, it's stupid.
She sent him a gif of a girl blowing hair out of her eyes. Come on, it can't be that bad.
Yes, it is. Not bad, just unrealistic.
A rock star?
No, but like that.
A famous actor?
No, but kind of close.
Tell me. Cole spent a minute waffling back and forth. She might think he was silly if he said what he was really passionate about. But then again, what did he have to lose? She didn't know who he was. Finally, he just let it all out.
If I had one wish, and I could be anything I wanted to be, I would be a bodybuilder. And I know that sounds stupid, but I love working my muscles. I love the feeling of sculpting myself. That's dumb, right?
Cole sat up in his bed, suddenly very self-conscious. Why had he told her? He'd never said that to anyone else. He could feel the jokes coming. That's not stupid. People are passionate about all kinds of things. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding.
Thanks for not making fun of me.
Come on. I'm passionate about really weird things. Like, I wore a net full of garbage for my Halloween costume. How stupid is that?
It looked cute on you.
Cole almost hit the send button, but stopped himself just in time. He didn't want to give away the fact that he'd seen her on Halloween night. He erased his comment and started over.
I like that you're passionate about things that matter.
Even though he and Amanda butted heads on more than one occasion, he did admire her convictions. He didn't grow up that way. His father was passionate about one thing, and only one thing: making money. He wanted the biggest house and the most expensive car. He couldn't care less if his company dumped pollution into the air or trash into the ocean. Cole liked that Amanda thought about more than just what profited herself. Thanks. Sometimes I worry it doesn't do any good. Like next week, I fear I'm going to fail. Dread pooled in Cole's stomach. She was talking about the opera house, but he couldn't know about it, or she would guess who he was for sure.
What's going on next week?
They are demolishing the old opera house. I'm organizing a protest, but I'm afraid no one will show up. I'm afraid it will be destroyed. Cole didn't know what to say to that. She would fail. He knew she would fail because he knew his father, and his father never failed at anything. His father would get his way, and Amanda would be crushed. And she would take it personally, which made him feel like he'd swallowed a lead ball.
It won't be your failure if you don't save the building.
Yes, it will. No one else cares about it. No one else wants to fight for it. And know what? I feel terrible for saying this, but maybe they're right. Maybe it is just a run-down old building. What? She was admitting that maybe it needed to be knocked down? Who was this? It couldn't be Amanda. She would never admit that to Cole's face. Why was she so adamant then that she could save the building if she thought maybe it couldn't be saved? He remembered how upset she'd gotten at the dance, how she'd started to cry.
Why do you want to save it?
I have a personal connection to the building. It's where my parents met. There it was. It was sentimental to her. That explained so much. Cole nodded as he typed.
That makes sense.
Yes, but it's also a stupid reason to want to save a building, isn't it? Maybe. But over the years, he'd gotten to know Amanda. She was the kind of person who cared deeply about people and things. And he could see her caring about the old opera house, even if it was for a sentimental reason like that.
It's not a stupid reason.
Good. Because I really want to save the building. Hey, I have an idea. Maybe you can come protest with me. Oh no. Now what was he supposed to do? He couldn't say yes. And if he said no, he'd look like a schmuck. He didn't want her to think he was a jerk. He tried to think of an appropriate response, one that would get him out of it but not offend her. Another text came through. Just kidding. I hope I didn't scare you too much. I know you're nervous about telling me who you are. You didn't think I'd insist on meeting you in person, did you? Relief flooded over him.
You got me. I was terrified.
Well, I hope you weren't too terrified. I want to meet you in person someday. The longer he chatted with her anonymously, the more he thought it could never happen. Maybe if she found out she'd been talking to Cole all this time, she'd hate him even more.
Maybe. We'll see.
Oh my gosh, I just looked at the clock. It's way too late. I didn't mean to chat with you this long. I'm sorry if I kept you up. I better get to sleep so I don't sleepwalk during my run tomorrow.
Good luck.
Cole had taken Eli's advice and signed up for the race. But since the movie ended with her mad at him, he wasn't sure how things would go tomorrow. At least she didn't hate her anonymous pen pal. Thank you. Good night, secret texting man. He smiled. He kind of liked that nickname. Chapter 10. Amanda stretched her legs in the chilly November morning as people milled about, getting ready for the annual Fun Feline Run. She'd stayed up later than she'd wanted, but it was so much fun texting her secret admirer, she couldn't stop. It was odd, but she felt like she could talk to him. Weird, huh? To tell a total stranger things she hadn't told anyone else. It was probably stupid, but she had a gut feeling that she could trust him. She must be mental. She checked in. A woman behind a table gave her a number, and Amanda stuck it on her shirt. 73. It was a good number. She checked her watch. 15 minutes and they would blow the whistle.
Hey,
someone said behind her. She recognized that voice. And even though she was mad at him, she couldn't help the butterflies that erupted in her stomach. She turned around to see Cole dressed in running shorts, the number 55 stuck on his shirt. Man, she knew he was built like a football player, but she didn't realize his muscles extended down his legs. He had calves like loaves of French bread. She forced her eyes away from them. What are you doing here? The question popped out without her thinking about it, and she immediately felt stupid. Obviously, he was here to run.
Earning money for the shelter. I convinced 10 people to pledge.
He began mimicking her, leaning over and touching his toes. She stared at him. Since when did Cole care about the shelter? She'd never seen him at any fundraising event. 10 people? How did you do that? She had 12 pledges, but she'd started asking last month.
I asked around my dad's office.
She watched him stretching. Do you even run?
I work out,
he said, looking offended.
I mean, maybe I don't run often, but my muscles are trim. I'm in shape. I can run if I want to.
She tried to figure out exactly what he was doing at this event. Cole didn't run. He didn't like these kinds of things. She squinted at him. What are you really doing here?
I'm trying to be supportive of you. Sheesh, is that so hard to swallow?
Amanda blinked. What had he just said? Of me? Why? Cole ducked his head and rubbed the back of his neck.
I feel bad about the Halloween dance. And then last night, for offending you again.
Oh. He was extending an olive branch. That was nice of him. But she was still upset about the stunt he'd pulled last night. Are you still supporting the demolition of the opera house? His shoulders sagged.
I have to, Mandy.
That wasn't true. He could do many things, including trying to find a way to save the opera house and still make his father money. What if they restored it and rented it out for weddings? Had he even spent 1 second thinking about that? She huffed. Then I don't want your support here. She wanted his support where it really mattered, where he could make a real difference. She turned away from him and continued to stretch her muscles. She figured he'd get discouraged and walk away, but when she glanced behind her, he was still there. What?
I'm running this race. You can't tell me not to.
The hard set of his jaw told her he wasn't going anywhere. Fine, whatever. It was a free country. He could run if he wanted to, but she didn't have to talk to him or even look at him. They gathered at the starting line, and the woman with the whistle stood off to the side. On your mark, she said. Get set. Then she blew the whistle, and everyone took off. Amanda had learned over the years to pace herself on this run. It covered several miles, and part of the way was uphill, so she didn't want to waste her energy at the beginning. She let the eager runners rush ahead and set herself in a reasonable jog. She glanced at Cole. He was beside her, matching her pace. Whatever. He could shadow her. She would just ignore him. He pointed to her feet.
Your shoe is untied.
I'm not falling for that one, she said flatly.
No, really, it is.
She looked down. Sure enough, her shoelaces were slapping against the pavement. She slowed and stopped, crouching down to tie it. Cole stooped over.
You should get those kind that don't untie. Did you know a 17-year-old invented those? He's a millionaire now.
She rolled her eyes and stood up. Really?
Yep, saw him on television.
Good for him. She started jogging again, and Cole matched her pace.
He's a real estate guy now.
She counted her steps, trying to ignore Cole. He pointed to the first water station.
You thirsty?
No.
Come on, let's get some water.
He slowed his pace and grabbed 2 water bottles, handing her one. She hadn't thought she was thirsty, but once she took a drink, she realized how good it tasted. She drank deeply, draining the water bottle. When she was done, she wiped her lips with the back of her hand. That was good. Cole beamed, like he'd invented it.
I knew you needed some.
Don't get all cocky. She tossed the empty bottle in the recycle bin and picked up her speed again.
So, your sister, what's her name again?
Stephanie?
Yeah. Is she dating anyone?
Cole was starting to breathe harder, but still he insisted on talking. Amanda narrowed her eyes at him. Why?
Just curious. Making conversation.
You don't ask something like that unless you're interested in dating someone.
Maybe I am.
He shrugged. Annoyance rolled off Amanda's back. What was Cole up to now? He was no more interested in dating Stephanie than she was in dating Eli. You are not. Stop being weird.
Is she dating anyone?
She's a senior. You're a junior. Juniors don't date seniors.
That's just ageism.
Amanda was about to argue with him, but then let it go. Maybe he was right. It was ageism. But also a stupid conversation because he wasn't interested in Stephanie at all. Fine, date Stephanie. See if I care.
You'd care?
He raised his eyebrows at her. Why was that look sexy on him? Why was she even thinking like that? She shook her head. Sweat beaded up on her forehead. Do you have to talk right now? You're ruining my concentration.
You have to concentrate to run?
She gave him a guttural yell and sprinted ahead of him. He didn't catch up to her but stayed 2 feet behind. Good. She wanted the quiet. She should have brought earphones. As she jogged, she heard Cole wheezing behind her. Man, he really was out of shape. How long had it been since he ran? She knew he wasn't into sports, but he sounded like a chain smoker or something. She ignored him for a few minutes, trying not to pay too much attention to him. What was his deal? Why did he even come on this run anyway? It was odd. She passed by the park playground. 2 little boys climbed up the slide. They looked like twins, both with blonde hair and skinny legs. One of them slipped, and the other leaned down to pull him up. They were adorable. Cole made a panting noise behind her. He sounded like he was having a hard time breathing. She glanced back. He didn't look so good. His face was pale, and he was really struggling. She slowed. You okay? He nodded, but his head lulled at a weird angle, and he stumbled, almost falling down. Hey, Amanda said, grabbing hold of him. What's wrong? She forced him to the side of the road, underneath a tree. He bent over and put his hands on his knees, his breathing labored.
I think,
he said as he gasped for air.
I'm having...
You're having what? What is it?
An asthma attack.
Crap. What did a person do for an asthma attack? She had no idea. Other runners cast her curious glances as they ran past. Cole's lips were turning blue. He wasn't getting enough air. She panicked. Help me! She called out. Someone!
What's wrong?
A middle-aged guy slowed and came toward them.
Is he hurt?
He thinks it's an asthma attack? What do I do?
Does he have an inhaler?
They both looked at Cole, who shook his head.
Haven't needed one in years.
The guy waved up ahead.
I'll go tell them at the next station. They can send a medic over.
Cole sat down on the grass and Amanda joined him. Thank you, she said, as the man jogged off. She sat there and listened to Cole struggle to breathe. Dear heavens, what was she going to do? She felt so helpless, and she'd been so mean to him, so guilt surfaced as well. Don't worry, they'll come soon. He nodded.
Thank you.
You shouldn't have been talking to me while you were running. Gah, why did she say that? Of all the things she could say, that popped out. It sounded like she was blaming him for having an asthma attack. Stupid.
Just making conversation.
I know, you said that. Maybe not so much conversation right now, okay? I really don't want you to die while you're with me. I think it would look bad on my college applications. He cringed as he struggled to breathe. I'm sorry, that's my defense mechanism. I get sarcastic when I'm scared. She fanned his face with her hand. Just take deep breaths. Okay, another stupid thing for her to say. It was obvious he was struggling to take deep breaths. That's what asthma did. Duh. She rubbed his back. There. Again with the stupid words. Why couldn't she shut up? Now she sounded like a 60-year-old. A couple of guys ran up to them, medical crosses on their shirts. Is this the guy with asthma? Yes. They started asking Cole questions, and Amanda stood back to let them help him. As they talked, she heard an ambulance siren in the distance. When it got louder, she realized it was coming for Cole. Panic ran through her. Was he in that much trouble that he had to go to the hospital? Guilt and fear swept over her, and she wrung her hands together. This was turning out to be one crappy day. Chapter 11. Cole laid back on the hospital bed, glad the doctors and nurses had finally left him alone. Yes, the attack had been bad, but the albuterol they'd given him had fixed everything. He was fine now. Why did they spend all that time asking him those questions? Someone appeared at the door. Amanda wrung her hands together as she stared, wide-eyed, at him. Her face was white. Cole?
What are you doing here?
I was worried. I came right away, but they wouldn't let me see you until now. She took a couple of steps into the room. Are you okay? He felt fine now, except it was freezing in the room and they made him put on a hospital gown. Stupid. Why would he need a hospital gown on for an asthma attack? All he needed was the medicine. He pulled the sheet up over him.
I'm fine.
She looked down at the foot of his bed. I didn't know you had asthma.
I had it as a kid. I thought I'd outgrown it. I haven't had an attack in years.
Amanda rubbed her hands together. I was scared for you.
That was a bad one. Worst I've ever had, to be honest.
He hated the feeling that he couldn't take in enough air. It was like he was trying to breathe underwater or through a tiny straw. No matter what he did, air just wouldn't go in. You should have said something when you started having trouble breathing. Yeah, he probably should have. Only he didn't want to look like a weakling in front of Amanda.
You're right,
he finally said. Is that why you don't like sports? It wasn't that he didn't like sports, it was just that he couldn't participate, so they were boring. He hated looking weak, though.
I like sports. I just couldn't join in when I was a kid.
She bit her lower lip. I'm sorry I ran ahead of you. That wasn't nice. She looked bothered by it. That touched him as very sweet. Amanda could be kind of hot-headed at times, but he liked that she really did care about people when it came down to it.
It was no big deal. Anyway, I'm fine now. I'm sure they'll come in any minute and let me go home.
Your father needs to come get you? She gave him a sheepish look. I heard them talking.
Okay. That shouldn't take long.
They've been waiting for him for over an hour, she said quietly. He closed his eyes and leaned back in his hospital bed. Nice one, Dad. What could be more important than picking up your son from the hospital? Amanda stood and crossed the room to the whiteboard they had hung on the wall. She picked up the marker and fiddled with the cap. Does he work a lot?
Yeah, he's a millionaire. You have to work a lot to make that kind of money.
He hadn't meant for his voice to sound so bitter. He did love his father. He was just a difficult man to live with. Work was always the priority. Amanda gave him a sympathetic look. What does your mom say about that? A stab of pain pricked his chest.
She's dead.
Amanda's gaze softened. I'm sorry.
Not your fault.
He lifted his hand as if to wave away the comment. I know, I meant I sympathize. I lost a parent too. She uncapped the marker and started drawing on the whiteboard.
I don't think that's for you to draw on.
Who cares? It wipes off. She drew a flower, then added a smiley face to it.
The hospital people might care.
She gave him a dirty look, then capped the marker and placed it on the rack. Fine.
You'd better wipe it off.
He was only teasing her. He kind of enjoyed the way the vein on her neck stood out when she got annoyed at him. She ignored his last comment. You really feeling fine? Because I should probably go. She folded her arms over the number sticker on her shirt.
Which parent did you lose?
He hadn't meant to blurt it out like that, but he was curious, so he let it stand. Amanda walked to the window. My father?
What happened?
Why was he asking her these questions? He could tell she was uncomfortable by the way she stood there, stiff. She pulled the blinds until she could see out the window. After a moment, she turned toward him. A car accident? What about your mom? How did she die? He smoothed out the sheet that covered him. He always hated that question. He didn't want to talk about it.
Same way.
Amanda took a step closer. I was 5. How old were you?
8.
She looked down at her hands. The pain never really goes away. They say time heals all wounds, but not this one. He agreed. The hole in his chest had not healed. It had just gotten a bit smaller.
I remember the way she laughed. Isn't it funny how small things stick in your mind? I can hear it if I concentrate.
Amanda walked to him and sat on the edge of his bed. I don't remember much about my father. Is that terrible? He put his hand on hers. He understood her guilt. The way you almost blame yourself for the memories that silently slip away and are too far gone to grasp anymore. There were memories of his mother that had faded away like that.
No.
My mom says he was the most handsome man in Rockford. She gave him a small smile. I can't even picture his face anymore. Not in 3 dimensions. I have photos, but they don't look like my memories, if that makes sense. He let his thumb graze the side of her hand.
Makes perfect sense.
The door opened, and his father came into the room. Amanda slipped away to the other side of the room.
Cole, how are you feeling? I'm fine. Another asthma attack, huh? And you didn't have your inhaler?
Cole stared at his father, a look of disbelief on his face.
Dad, I haven't had an inhaler since 6th grade.
His father frowned and took a step back.
Why not? Because the doctor said I hadn't had an attack in over 3 years. Remember?
He obviously didn't. His face registered surprise. The doctor came into the room then, and his father stepped by his side. The doctor flipped through his chart.
Looks like your son responded well to the albuterol. I think you can go home now.
He handed a piece of paper to his father.
This prescription will get him an inhaler. He should keep it on him at all times in case of another attack.
His father gave Cole a pointed look.
Yes, of course.
Cole glanced around for Amanda, but she must have left because she was no longer in the room. He silently cursed his father for his poor timing. Chapter 12. Amanda slipped out of the hospital and walked to her car, her hands shaking. She had never seen anyone have an asthma attack before. So scary. He couldn't breathe. She couldn't imagine what it would be like to not be able to take in a breath. She would have freaked out, but he was pretty calm about it. She didn't want to get in the way, so she'd left him with his father. It had been weird that he hadn't come straight to the hospital. What was Cole's home life like? Sounded like his father was always at work. Her mother had always tried to make time for Amanda and her sister. It was difficult being a single mom, but she balanced her work and her children. Amanda never resented the time her mother spent at work because she always made sure they would do things over the weekend. She pulled up to her house and cut the engine. Her sister must be home since her car was in the driveway. Amanda entered the house and walked to her bedroom. As she neared her room, she heard her inside, talking. Amanda peeked in the crack in the door. Stephanie was on her computer, her headphones on. She was taping another vlog. Dang, she wanted to go into her room. It wasn't fair that Stephanie taped in their bedroom. She peeked around. Maybe she could sneak in if she was careful not to make noise. Amanda crept in, making sure she didn't get caught on camera in the background. Her sister shot her a glare, but kept taping. I'm not going to apologize for my last episode. Brandon Travers single-handedly destroyed the movie. And I'm not going to believe that Brandon Travers himself is leaving comments on this blog. That's absurd. He's a movie star. He has no time to argue with me on a barely known vlog, so whoever is leaving comments saying you're Brandon Travers, stop it, because you're not. She clicked her mouse and took off her headphones. Way to interrupt my broadcast, she said, flinging the nearest thing at Amanda. Luckily, it was a pillow. I was very careful not to interrupt, thank you. Amanda flopped down on her bed. Getting bad feedback from your last vlog? Stephanie made a face. All I did was say that Brandon Travers totally destroyed the part of Xander, and people are going nuts. Well, not people exactly, just a few, and one really annoying commenter who is using Brandon's name. It's stupid. How do you know it's not really Brandon Travers? Amanda was joking, but it could be. It wasn't completely out of the realm of possibility. Brandon Travers, chatting with some 2-bit vlogger. I don't even have 3,000 subscribers yet. How would he even have found my vlog? Amanda shrugged. Did you tag him in your video? Sure, but 1 billion people probably tag him. He's famous. Just saying. Maybe you should ask him to prove he's Brandon Travers. Stephanie huffed. I'm not going to waste my time. She stood and grabbed her notebook and pen and headed out the door. Amanda settled against a pillow. She wanted to check on Cole. Was that stupid? After yesterday, she thought she'd never speak to him again. But today, she felt differently. She wanted to talk. She texted him. You okay? His response came back fast. I'm fine. Only a little hurt. You left without saying goodbye. Why would you need to say goodbye? We see each other every day at school. I wanted to see if you were free tonight. She wrinkled her nose. Oh no, it was getting weird now. She made a joke out of it. Free? What are you doing? Asking me out? Would it be terrible if I was? She paused. She felt extremely guilty that he'd had an asthma attack while she was trying to run away from him. She hadn't been very nice to him, but she didn't want to go on a date with him. The whole movie thing ended in disaster. She didn't want a repeat. Let's pretend you didn't just ask me out. The dots appeared, then disappeared, like he was typing, then erasing. Okay, I'm not asking you out. But I have no plans for tonight, and we could do something together
unless you still hate me.
I don't hate you.
So, not a date. Just two people who get hungry at the same time who happen to eat together?
She couldn't help it. She laughed. Cole did have a way of making her smile. She sent him a smile emoji. All right, but I'm driving. I'll be at your house at 6.
Deal.
Chapter 13. Cole waited in the chair by the window. He was full of nervous energy, like he needed to go lift weights or something. Her car pulled up and he jumped out of his chair. Despite the tension they'd had this morning at the fun run, he was looking forward to spending the evening with Amanda. He climbed into her car and she turned to him. How are you feeling? She asked.
I'm fine. The doctor said my attack was brought on by exercise. I just have to keep my inhaler with me now.
And maybe not sign up for any more fun runs.
That too.
He grinned at her.
I'm sure tonight will be asthma attack free. Unless you have some sprinting planned.
Absolutely not. She turned onto 2nd Street to get downtown, then stopped in front of Grind It Up. Is this okay? I like their sandwiches.
This is fine.
He climbed out of her car. It felt a little strange that she was driving, but it wasn't horrible. He could do this. He and Amanda walked into the coffee shop together. The place was busy, with most of the tables full of couples and groups of people eating. He glanced at the menu while they waited in line. How did you find out you had asthma as a kid? Cole shifted his weight. It wasn't a pleasant memory.
My dad wanted me to get some exercise, so he made me sign up for baseball as a kid. I had an attack during one of our games.
Did he take you to the hospital?
Dad wasn't there.
So he made you join a team but didn't go to the games? Cole nodded.
But he wasn't a terrible father. I know that's what you're thinking. He worked a lot, but he didn't abuse me. He hired nannies to take care of me. I had everything I ever wanted.
Except a father, she said under her breath. Yeah. He didn't want to get into it with her, though.
Tell me about your mom. Where does she work?
She sells insurance. Says that it's boring as heck, but she gets paid good money, so she keeps doing it.
Hey, if it pays the bills, it's not a bad thing, right?
Yeah. Amanda said it like she'd rather eat mud than sell insurance.
What's wrong?
She looked up at him. Nothing, it's just, my mom hates her job. I don't want to be like that when I'm older. Stuck in a going-nowhere job that I hate. That's one of my biggest fears. He knew she feared the future, and so this totally made sense. Another piece of the puzzle now in place.
Amanda, he said softly, I can't imagine you ever stuck doing something you don't want to do.
She blinked, as if his words affected her. Why do you say that?
Because you're obstinate.
Hey!
She whacked his arm. He chuckled. Let me finish. You're stubborn, but you put that towards the things that really matter to you. You have convictions. You care about people. And when you get your mind set on something, you never waver, not even for a second. Does that sound like someone who would be stuck in an office job her whole life?
She let out a breath and stared at the menu on the wall. You make me sound much better than I really am.
Just telling the truth.
Well, you're lucky. You know what you're going to do after high school. He sure did. Cole had his entire life planned for him. But he couldn't say that because that would totally give him away as her secret texter. So he just sighed.
Yeah.
The line moved and they came up to the counter. They ordered their sandwiches and found a spot to sit. Amanda looked wistfully out the window. Looks like it might rain.
Yeah, the clouds are sure dark.
Why did you really come on the run this morning? Amanda turned and stared at him, her brown eyes intent. What did she think? What did she want him to say? To admit that he liked her? That he wanted to be around her? He shrugged.
It was something different, that's all.
She looked away from him and picked up her sandwich. Fail. Again. He was going to fail with Amanda from now until eternity. He wanted to get rid of the tension between them. Wanted things to be more like Thursday when she was in his arms, dancing.
I'm sorry about last night, getting caught on Main Street.
How long have you known? The question didn't make sense to Cole.
Known what?
He took a large bite of his sandwich. That your father was going to knock down the opera house. Her question shot a pang of guilt through him. He chewed and stared down at his plate. He'd known about the parking garage plan for 6 months. His father bought the opera house shortly after the plans were finalized. He swallowed.
A while?
So, when I talked about saving the opera house at lunch, you knew your father was the one knocking it down? He didn't want to admit it, but yes, that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah.
And you didn't tell me.
How could I? You would have gone off on me like you did at the dance.
I would have appreciated your honesty.
Even though I don't agree with you?
Cole gave her a flat look.
I highly doubt that.
She closed her eyes. Look, I can be passionate about some things, I get it. But you have to admit, tearing down the opera house is destroying a piece of history. This was an argument he knew he couldn't win. There was no solution to it. His father would never budge, and he couldn't side against him, even if he did think the opera house was worth saving, which he didn't. He rubbed his temples.
We'll have to agree to disagree.
Amanda slowly nodded. She didn't look like she wanted to agree to disagree. She looked determined to get him to see her side of things. He hated this. Even if she managed to convince him it was best to save the opera house no matter what, his father would never let him have a different opinion. It was his way or the highway. They ate in silence, the painful tension growing between them. Why could he never seem to get rid of the distance? Why did he always say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing? Maybe he and Amanda were not meant to be together. They finished their food. He was about to tell her he was sorry. The two people who were both hungry at the same time probably shouldn't have eaten together. That he was wrong and would be forever. But Amanda spoke before him. Come with me. He must have had a strange look on his face because she said, Stop looking at me like that. She grabbed his hand. Her touch sent a shiver through him. Can you stop being your father's son for just a few minutes? Do you think you can do that? He was so tempted to tell her yes, that he would be whatever she wanted him to be. That he would walk around the world barefoot for her if it meant she would not hate him anymore. But he was who he was.
I don't know what good it would do,
he finally said. Please. For me? Amanda stared at him with her large brown eyes, and for a split second, all the tension was gone, and the coffee shop melted away, and it was just Amanda and him. And he knew he would do anything to make her happy.
Okay.
She squeezed his hand, and all of his senses came alive. Then come with me. I want to show you something. He stood. He would follow her anywhere. They left the coffee shop. He started toward her car, but she stopped him. No, that way. She pointed down the street toward the opera house. He nodded, knowing what was going to happen. She wanted to try to convince him. That was fine. He wasn't going to object to her anymore. They walked down the street. Amanda shoved her hands in her coat pockets. It's chilly.
It's November.
She breathed in deeply. I love the fall, don't you?
Yeah. I've always loved the smell of crisp leaves.
Me too. It's a promise. He wrinkled his nose.
A promise?
She lowered her lashes, looking embarrassed. It's stupid.
No, tell me.
She let out a small laugh. When I was a kid, Christmas was the best thing in the world. All kids think Christmas is the bomb, right?
Right.
Well, when it started to get colder and the trees changed, to me that was a promise that Christmas was coming. A promise that I would get the best holidays in a row. He chuckled.
You're right. The best holidays are packed into the last couple of months of the year.
Right? Halloween kicks it off, then Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. Of course, Christmas is the best one.
Of course.
Amanda slowed her steps as they neared the opera house. He expected her to point out the great architecture or start to talk about the history of the building. Instead, she kept walking, turning the corner and heading down the side street.
Where are we going?
You'll see. They walked down the sidewalk to the end of the building. Then Amanda slipped into the shadows behind the opera house. Cole followed her into the darkness.
Mandy?
He asked when he didn't see her anymore. Come up! She leaned over the railing. She had climbed up the back steps. He started to feel uneasy.
What are you doing?
Just come up here. He started up the steps. But before he got to her, she disappeared. He stood on the landing by the locked door and peered into the dark.
Mandy!
He hissed. Over here! She stuck her head out of one of the windows.
How did you... Never mind. I don't want to know how you knew that window was unlocked.
Climb in.
Why was he obeying her? If his father found out what he was doing, he'd get into so much trouble. Although it was practically his property since his father owned it. At least, that's what he used to convince himself it wasn't that much of a crime, as he lifted himself into the building. Amanda turned on the flashlight to her phone and took his hand again.
Suddenly, nothing else mattered. Not that they'd climbed into the window of the opera house, not that he and she were at odds, and definitely not that they were alone in an abandoned building. Follow me, she said, almost reverently. As they walked, he couldn't help but notice the intricate woodwork and beautiful arches. The wood looked to be in good condition. The building wasn't in as bad a shape as he'd originally thought. Maybe his father had exaggerated. Amanda led him up a short staircase to a room behind the stage. They entered, and Cole peered around the room. It looked like a storage room of some kind, filled with costumes hanging on racks and boxes filled with props from performances gone by. Large posters hung on the walls displaying events that had taken place at the opera house. Some looked to be very old. Amanda led him to one of the posters. It had the name Lily Foster in large letters across the top. The drawing of a woman with blonde hair done up in a classic 1920s hairstyle smiled out at him.
You've mentioned her before, haven't you?
Yes. Amanda touched the corner of the poster. Lily Foster was a very famous opera singer. Back then, this was a real opera house.
What do you know about her?
Amanda shrugged. Not a ton of things. My grandma saw her perform here. And these posters are pretty cool. She pulled him over to a corner of the room and sat down, cross-legged. A stack of papers lay in a pile under a window. Cole sat next to her.
What's that?
Other documents and pictures I found in here. He grew suspicious.
How often have you broken into here?
Amanda's face turned pink. I've never taken anything out, I swear. She didn't answer his question, but he let it go.
Why do you come here?
Amanda shuffled the papers around, then pulled out an old photograph. It showed a cast of actors on stage, probably the opera house stage, Cole figured. Amanda pointed. Those are my parents. Chapter 14. Amanda knew she needed to get Cole to understand. She didn't want to share this part of her, but it was the only way. She gave Cole the photo of her parents. He held it close to his face to examine it in the moonlight.
I can see the resemblance. What play were they in?
The Music Man?
Was this before they were married?
Amanda nodded. She took the photograph back from him. She stared at it, her desire to tell him suddenly strong. They met here, when this was being used as the community theater. They got the starring roles, and as their characters fell in love, they fell in love too.
That's sweet.
His voice had a husky tone to it. She swallowed, the next part more difficult to say. I was so young when my father died. I remember crying at bedtime wanting my dad to read to me. I didn't understand why he wouldn't come. Cole let out a breath.
Yeah, I remember feeling the same way when my mom died. I didn't understand either.
One night, when I was particularly inconsolable, my mother snuggled with me in bed and told me she had a story only she could tell. A special story, and I was supposed to calm down so I could hear it. I grew quiet. I wanted the special story. Cole leaned closer to her.
What was it?
She told me the story of when they met, here at the opera house. She made the opera house sound magical, like a castle out of a fairy tale. She talked about the play, how my father would take her out for ice cream after practice, and how they bonded and fell in love. She would bring me and my sister here, when it was still open and functioning as a theater. I would imagine my parents up on stage. My dream was to see the Music Man on this very stage, but I never got to see it. Her voice broke, and she realized she was crying. She wiped at her face, embarrassed. Cole put his arm around her. Warmth and calm enveloped her, and she leaned into him, putting her head on his chest. They closed this building when the new community playhouse was built, and that was it. Now they're going to knock it down. His arms tightened around her.
So when they locked the doors, you found a way to come inside?
I didn't mean to break in. The window was open a crack, and I was just going to close it. But then I realized I could climb in. And then I found this room with all of these photographs and playbills. I was so excited to look through them, to find the one of my parents. All this time I'd been hearing the story, and then I got to see it right here in these documents. He pressed his lips to the top of her head.
What a find.
I know, I couldn't believe it. But I didn't feel like it was right for me to take them. I figured someone would restore the building eventually. They would want them so they could see how the opera house looked back in the day. Her throat closed up and she forced in a shuddering breath. When I'm missing my father, I come here. It's where I feel closest to him.
I can see that.
But now it's all going to be lost. The tears wouldn't stop coming now. They ran down her cheeks and clung to her glasses. She closed her eyes and choked out a sob. Cole pulled her onto his lap and cradled her in his arms.
Jeez, Mandy, why didn't you say something?
I've been trying to tell you. Her words sounded strangled. He rocked her gently as he held her close to his chest. She could feel his heartbeat as her cheek pressed to him. He smelled of musk and pine.
"I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I didn't understand. It was just an old building to me."
"I know." She clung to Cole, the feeling of being in his arms somehow consoling. It felt comforting, amazing. But after a while, she started to feel self-conscious. She shouldn't be this close to him. She pulled back and took in his face, the shock of hair that flopped down onto his forehead, the concerned look in his eyes. He reached to her face and slowly removed her glasses. He wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The feeling of his skin on her cheek sent shivers through her. She closed her eyes, her heart rate going 1,000,000 miles a second. She felt vulnerable, exposed. Cole. She had been fighting her feelings for him, but right now they were stronger than ever. He was the strength she needed. He was stability. The rock. He didn't waver. He was someone she could hold on to. Cole kissed her forehead and her world tilted. His lips were warm and soft, and the simple act of pressing them to her skin ignited all her feelings into a raging fire. She'd never been kissed before. Not like that. Not by a boy, a man. She opened her eyes and stared at him, at the lips she craved to have on more than her forehead. His gaze caressed her. In his eyes, she saw a softness, a longing, and the same feeling was growing inside of her. She needed him, wanted to feel his lips on her own. He leaned closer, and anticipation filled her.
"Mandy,"
he whispered, a silent plea in his voice. She hadn't expected him to speak. She pulled back. "What?"
"I'm going to kiss you. If you don't want me to, tell me now."
He was asking her permission. He was sweet, but she didn't need sweet right now. She wanted to finally experience her first real kiss. "Shut up and kiss me," she whispered. He obliged. The second their lips touched, a wave of heat exploded over her skin. His lips were hot, and his kiss hungry. She clung to him, her fingers digging into his shoulder muscles. A myriad of feelings coursed through her as they kissed. Attraction, desire, fascination. She'd known Cole for how long? And she'd never imagined what it would be like to be in his arms, to kiss him like this, to taste his lips. His hand pressed on her back, pulling her closer. Her hand slid up his chest. It was a solid wall. Her skin erupted in goosebumps as he kissed her jaw, her neck. "Maybe we should stop," she said, breathless.
"Maybe,"
he said, but his lips kept going. "Cole." He pulled back.
"Do you know how long I've wanted to do that?"
"No." His words implied a long time, which was odd to her. He'd never made a move, never asked her out, at least not until the dance. He'd even dated other girls. He touched his forehead to hers.
"Since you told me you were Destiny's best friend and I should just live with it because she would never like me as much."
Amanda laughed. "I remember that. 6th grade?"
"Yeah."
"Man, I was such a dork. Why did you even like me?" He shrugged.
"I don't know. You were fiercely loyal and cute.
She sobered and put her arms around his neck. Was it worth the wait? He nuzzled her neck.
If you don't know the answer to that, then I'm not telling you.
What kind of a non-answer is that? She giggled as he nipped at her earlobe.
All right, I'll tell you.
He stopped to give her a lingering look. Then he pressed his lips to hers in a slow, tantalizing kiss. She melted into him.
Worth every second,
he said between kisses. She ran her fingers through his soft hair. You smell good. He chuckled.
Really?
He said, his tone teasing. Yes, and you taste even better. She kissed him again. A crashing noise sounded from below them, and Amanda froze, fear jolting through her. What was that? She hissed, even though asking Cole was stupid because he was in the same room she was, and had no way of knowing what it was either. She grabbed her glasses and shoved them onto her face.
Has anyone ever come in here while you were here?
No! He was silent for a moment, and they both listened for any other sounds. When nothing came, Cole slid Amanda off his lap and stood up.
We'd better go investigate.
Amanda didn't want to investigate. She'd rather pretend she didn't hear anything and sneak back out the window. Isn't this the part of the movie where one of us gets chopped up into tiny pieces? Cole smiled, but she could tell it was strained.
Come on.
He held out his hand to her. Okay, she whispered, but if you die, it's not my fault.
I die? What about you?
He said, the teasing tone back in his voice. I'm using you as a shield. She grabbed onto his shoulders and pressed into his back. Man, he was a solid wall of muscles. Dang, you work out a lot, don't you?
Sure,
he said.
Doesn't every guy?
No. Definitely not every guy. Did Cole not realize how sexy his muscles were? They descended the stairs, and Amanda strained to hear any sounds at all. No sounds came except the occasional creaking of the stairs. They stepped onto the stage and walked past the curtains. A stage light had fallen and now lay in pieces on the hardwood floor. Amanda looked up. It must have had a few screws loose.
Or termites chewed through the wood.
She frowned. Is the building in that bad of shape? He shrugged.
I don't know. It doesn't look that bad, but it's dark and I'm not a building inspector. My father said it's not worth restoring.
The words cut through Amanda's heart, and she let out a gasp. Cole turned to her.
I'm sorry, that was not what I meant to say.
She took a second to gain her composure. You can't help what your father said, but I'm hoping there can be something we can do. Cole looked confused.
What can we do?
She let out a frustrated grunt. I don't know. Call someone? Find a buyer who would want to restore this into something grand again? Cole frowned.
Mandy,
he said, like he was lecturing a child.
That's not going to happen.
So she'd brought him here and cut open her veins to bleed all over the floor, only to have it not matter at all. She blinked back tears. You're not going to try to save the opera house with me? He opened his mouth to say something, but then stopped and closed his mouth. He ran a hand through his hair.
I can't. Don't you see? I can't defy my father.
You wouldn't have to defy him. All you would have to do is try to help him see this as more than just a dilapidated building. His gaze flashed to the fallen stage light, and Amanda knew the answer. He was not going to help her. She swallowed and turned from him. She had no more words left. Nothing she could do would change his mind. He was his father's son. And apparently, she wasn't worth fighting for. Chapter 15. Amanda pulled a washcloth from the cupboard and turned on the hot water. She washed her face and tried to scrub away the tears, to scrub away the pain. She'd opened up to Cole and had thought he'd understood. But no, he had turned his back on her, and that hurt worse than anything. For the first time, she'd shared with him something she'd never shared before. She'd put her heart out on a line, and Cole had stabbed a knife through it. Why didn't he see how important this was to her? Why didn't he care enough to make an effort? She needed him to see her side of things. Needed him to be there for her. But no. He acted like the building was going to be destroyed no matter what, and she couldn't face that. Couldn't let it go. Not when it meant that much to her. As she grabbed a towel, her phone chimed. She dried her face and put her glasses back on before she picked up her phone.
Are you awake?
It was her secret texter. She was glad to have someone to talk to. She needed to let some things out. Yes.
Good. I was hoping to chat.
Me too. I had a terrible night. I need someone to talk to about it.
Why? What happened?
She climbed into bed and leaned against her pillows. Emotions and thoughts raced through her. How much should she say? I opened up to someone tonight and got stabbed in the back.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. Tell me about it.
She took in a deep breath and let it out slowly. She should feel weird talking to a total stranger about this stuff, but she felt at peace about it. She wanted to tell him. I took someone to my secret place, the place I go when I feel my world is falling apart.
You have a secret place?
Yes, and I've never told a soul about it. I go there when my life gets out of control, when I think nothing will get better. When it all crumbles, this place helps heal me. Was that sappy? She held her breath, hoping it didn't sound dumb to him.
That sounds like heaven.
Relief poured over her. Yes, exactly. That is my heaven. And I went out on a limb and shared it with someone, and he didn't appreciate it at all.
Wow. Sounds like a jerk.
Amanda thought about Cole, about how he'd pulled her close as she got emotional, how he'd comforted her and rocked her until she calmed down. That was kind of him, and the way he'd tenderly kissed her. She closed her eyes and touched the tips of her fingers to her lips. He had meant that kiss. No, he's not a jerk. I guess he just didn't understand how important that place was to me.
What did he do?
Amanda stopped. What had Cole done? He had implied the building was falling apart, which, if she were being honest, it was. Heck, part of it fell apart while they were there. He told her he couldn't defy his father. And maybe he was right. Maybe he couldn't defy his father. She chewed her lip. She couldn't admit Cole was right. She didn't want him to be right. She needed her father. She needed to feel close to him. She debated what to tell her secret texter. He refused to help me. Guilt closed her throat. That wasn't exactly true. Maybe she wasn't treating Cole very fairly. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. He was typing and then deleting what he said.
What do you want him to do?
Amanda rolled onto her shoulder. What did she want Cole to do? He was just a teenager. He couldn't buy the building. He couldn't stop his father from doing what he really wanted to do. But he could talk to his father at the very least. He could show he cared by supporting her. Before she had a chance to tell those things to her texter, she got another message.
You know what? It doesn't matter what you wanted. It matters that he made you feel unsupported, and he shouldn't have done that.
Tears pricked Amanda's eyes. He understood, and he didn't even fully know the situation. But somehow he knew what she needed to hear. OMG, I could kiss you right now. He sent her 3 dots, as if he didn't know what to say. Amanda laughed. What, too forward of me?
Sorry, you just surprised me.
How?
You just don't seem like the kind of girl who would kiss just any guy.
Once again, the memory of Cole's lips on hers invaded her mind. You're right. I'm not.
Good. Because when I kiss a girl, it means something.
How many girls have you kissed? Amanda wasn't sure why she asked him that. It was slightly flirty, and maybe she just wanted to lighten the mood. Plus, now she was curious.
That is a pretty private question. If I answer truthfully, will you answer it back?
Oh, great. What was she getting herself into? She didn't really want to answer that, but she didn't want to tell him no. He'd think it was odd. Yes. Her phone indicated he was typing for quite a while before the message came through.
I've kissed 4. 1 was in 2nd grade, though, and doesn't count. She kissed me because I was sad, and she wanted to cheer me up.
And the other 3?
1 was my first date. I kissed her on the doorstep because I thought that's what you always did. I didn't realize until later that I probably shouldn't kiss a girl unless I really liked her.
That was sweet of you, though.
Yeah, I guess. Then I dated a girl for a while, and she was my first real kiss. My first kiss with a girl who I liked. But then she started liking another guy, and we broke up.
And the last one? He paused for a while, and she thought maybe she'd lost him until an answer finally came through.
The last one meant something special. She's one I could fall in love with.
A strange feeling came over Amanda. It was a mixture of jealousy and something else she couldn't put her finger on. She didn't know who this guy was, but he sounded like a really nice guy. The kind of guy she could like. And to know that he had kissed other girls, and specifically a girl he was still interested in, wasn't comfortable. Good for you. She whacked her forehead with the palm of her hand. Good for you? What kind of a thing was that to say? How stupid was she?
Okay, your turn. How many guys have you kissed?
Amanda grew nervous to tell him. Aside from my uncles at family events?
Yes.
And aside from my cousin who wanted to know what kissing a girl felt like?
Gross.
It was just a peck.
Okay, then. Yes, aside from your cousin who you kissed, even though that's gross.
Amanda rolled onto her back and pulled the covers over her shoulders. Her room had gotten cold, and she was kind of trying to delay answering the question because she was self-conscious about it. But she agreed to tell him, so she typed it fast and hit enter. 1. No answer came back. Amanda started to freak out. What was he thinking? Did he care that she had only had 1 real kiss? What would he think if she told him it had happened tonight? Her phone vibrated and she looked at the screen.
Wow.
Chapter 16. Cole jumped off the weight machine, his pulse racing. 1. Was Amanda saying what he thought she was saying? Her first kiss had been with him? Tonight? Wow, what? Is that good? Bad? Are you thinking I'm such a prude? That I'm naive? What?
I wasn't thinking any of those things.
Then what did your wow mean? Cole ran a hand over his hair. Suddenly, the kiss he'd shared with Amanda meant so much more. She had never experienced that before, and she chose to share it with him. He swallowed, a lump forming in his throat. She'd kissed him, and then he'd made her feel terrible. What a jerk move. He didn't need to do that. He could have told her he'd fight with her. Even if all he did was talk to his father, it would be something, right? He texted her back.
I was just surprised is all.
Well, you're making me self-conscious. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. He sat back down on the weight machine.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make you feel bad.
Cole tapped the side of his phone. Was it bad that he wanted to know what Amanda thought of the kiss? He wondered if he would regret talking to her about it, but he really wanted to know.
Tell me about him. The guy you kissed.
He waited a long time for Amanda to answer, and he started to get nervous she'd figured out it was him. But then her text came through. He can be amazingly kind and understanding, and then he could be pig-headed and a real jerk-face. Cole stared at the phone. He did mess up back at the opera house. He didn't know what to say to make everything better, though. His father was going to get his way. There wasn't anything else to do but back off and let the building be destroyed. And yet, if he was going to make Amanda his girl, he needed to support her, fully. He was starting to see that now. He had to take her side, even if that meant standing up to his father.
I'm sorry he was a jerk to you. You don't deserve that.
He didn't receive a text back right away, so he stood and crossed the room. It was late, but Cole wasn't tired. He was done working out, though, so he shut off the lights in the weights room and walked into the kitchen. He opened the fridge in the dark and rummaged around for something. His father came into the kitchen and flicked on the light. Cole slid his phone into his pocket and nodded at his father.
You're home late?
His father exhaled and loosened his tie.
Just dealing with a few hiccups.
Hiccups with the opera house? His father raised his eyebrows.
No. Why?
Disappointment filled him. If his father was having trouble with the demolition, maybe he could find a way to delay it. But it sounded like it was still going well.
No reason.
His phone chimed in his pocket, but he ignored it. His father sighed and scrubbed a hand over his face.
Just dealing with some bad PR. I have to turn things around or it will be bad for our company.
He pointed to the refrigerator door.
Are you going to eat something or are you going to just stand there and let the cold air out?
Cole grabbed a pudding cup and let the door swing shut. His father looked a bit disheveled.
You fall asleep at the desk again?
His father shook his head.
No.
What's that on your cheek? Cole squinted. OMG. Was that lipstick? It was red, and it looked like it could be lipstick. What was his father doing? His father wiped at his cheek and shrugged.
Sweet and sour sauce, probably. You headed to bed?
Cole stared at him. Was his father seeing someone? And why had the possibility never even registered to him?
Yeah, after I shower. Okay. Good night.
He left the kitchen. Cole pulled a spoon out of the drawer, this new information filtering through his brain. If his father was dating a woman, that would explain all the late nights he'd been having at work. The way he seemed preoccupied even when he was at home. Cole pulled out his phone and looked at what Amanda had sent as he dug his spoon into his pudding. Sorry, my sister came in and wanted to talk.
What did she want?
Nothing important.
No worries, I was talking to my father. I think he's secretly dating a woman behind my back.
Amanda sent him a shocked emoji face. Wow, seriously?
Yeah, he had lipstick on his cheek, and he's been staying later and later at work.
Dang, what are you going to do? Confront him? Cole hadn't thought about it. Would he ever confront him? Or just pretend he didn't know? At what point would his father tell him?
I don't know.
That's kind of weird, huh? My mom doesn't date, but if she did, it would feel odd.
It's different. I never thought about him dating. I wonder who she is.
Maybe you can follow him. Do some undercover work. Find out.
That's creepy.
Yeah, maybe. I know. I could find out for you. Tell me who your father is. She sent him a winky face.
Ha ha. Funny.
His spoon scraped the bottom of the pudding cup. He rinsed it under the faucet and tossed it into the recycling bin. Then he threw the spoon in the sink. It made a clanging noise. I hope you know I'm kidding.
Yes, I do.
I'd better say goodnight. My sister is bugging me to shut off my phone. Cole chuckled. He often wondered what it would be like to have a sibling. When he was younger, he begged for a brother. When he realized it wasn't going to happen, he decided he was okay with being an only child. But he had to admit he was a little jealous of those who had siblings growing up.
Good night.
Chat with you tomorrow, secret texter. Chapter 17. Amanda stood in front of the opera house, her arms outstretched as far as she could reach. She knew it was a dream. Everything around her had that dream-like quality, hazy and misty. A large bulldozer appeared before her, the dark windows menacing. She stood alone. The bulldozer roared to life, and a blast of hot air hit her in the face, blowing her hair back. "Stop!" she called. No one was around to hear her. She trembled. There was no way she could stop it from coming all alone. It would sweep her out of the way like a bug. The machine crept forward, the engine whining, straining. The metal scoop hit Amanda's leg, and she took a step back. The machine seemed to growl at her. And then the dark window turned clear, and someone materialized behind the wheel. Cole! He snarled at her.
Get out of the way!
He shouted over the roar of the bulldozer. The building behind her faded away, and instead, her father stood there. "Papa!" Amanda said under her breath as she tried to run to him. He waited for her, but her legs wouldn't work. They wouldn't carry her to him. The bulldozer sprang to life and came after her, nipping at her heels. She woke, her heart beating wildly. The loud noise of a vehicle outside made her jump out of bed and run to the window. A neighbor was pulling a tree stump with a truck. Her dream still fresh in her mind, Amanda pondered it. Cole wasn't the one knocking down the opera house. He wasn't even in a position to do anything to stop it. Not really. She'd been so unfair to him. Guilt rose in her gut. She needed to make things right with him. "What are you doing up?" Stephanie rolled over and pulled a pillow onto her head. "It's Sunday." "It's 9 o'clock. Not exactly the crack of dawn." Stephanie groaned. "Turn off the lights." Amanda let go of the curtain, and it once again enveloped the room in darkness. Her sister hated sunlight. Maybe she was a vampire. That actually would explain a lot. "Now leave." Amanda picked up her pillow and tossed it across the room at Stephanie. It hit her in the mound of pillows already on her head. Hey, she said, coming out from beneath them. No crossing the line. I didn't. Just my pillow did. Stephanie hugged it to her chest. Then it's mine. No way, you'll get slobber on it. Amanda stepped across the line and grabbed it from Stephanie. Stephanie sat up, her blonde hair mussed from sleeping. Amanda thought she'd get yelled at for stepping into Stephanie's space, but she didn't say anything about it. Hey, I know you're upset about the opera house, and I understand why. Stephanie hadn't really talked to her about it, so Amanda was surprised. You do? Yeah. She scratched her scalp. It's the bedtime stories, isn't it? The one Mom used to tell you? Amanda gaped at her sister. She didn't even know Stephanie had paid attention. You heard those? Mom always said you were the romantic one in the family. What? Me? What was she talking about? Amanda wasn't romantic. She was far from it. Stephanie made a face. You so are. You devoured the stories Mom would tell you at night. You romanticized that opera house. Do you remember the first time we went there? Amanda thought back. For Peter Pan? Yes. You remember what you kept saying? No, I was little. You kept saying that someday you would meet your one true love at the opera house, that you would fall for him there. You were in love with the stories, and you thought the opera house had some magical powers or something. Amanda didn't remember that. That's funny. You were always talking about that place, how it was so special. Stephanie grew sober. So, I understand why you're trying to fight to save it. Do you think I have a chance? Stephanie didn't answer right away, which was answer enough. She sighed and rubbed a hand over her face. I think what you're doing is noble. But... Stephanie shrugged. Her non-answer told Amanda everything. She didn't think it would work. Amanda knew Stephanie was right. She just didn't want to admit it. Stephanie let out a sigh. Maybe if I mention your efforts on my vlog, you will gain more support. Maybe it will make a difference. Amanda gaped at her sister. You'd do that? Stephanie smiled. Sure. Thank you. Amanda rushed to her and gave her a hug. No need to get all emotional over it, Stephanie said. Amanda smiled and backed up. Her sister's sassy way of saying she was done with the subject. Amanda opened up her hamster cage and scooped up Ferb. The little guy sniffed her hand as she brought him over to the desk. She sat down and fished a sunflower seed out of the treat bag. If her family had money, she could save the opera house. She could just buy it. She could do a lot of things. Maybe even make a difference in the world. Ferb wiggled out of her grasp and climbed up her arm. She picked him up and set him on the desk and dug out another sunflower seed. She set the seed down in front of him and he sniffed it before picking it up and stuffing it into his cheek with the other one. She watched as Ferb explored the desktop. Maybe if Stephanie could talk about it on her vlog, she could get more community support. Maybe she could... Her phone buzzed and she grabbed Ferb, put him back in his cage and looked at the screen. Oh no. Who is it? Stephanie asked. It's Mrs. Henderson. Stephanie scrambled out of bed. I'm busy tonight. She rushed out of their room into the hallway bathroom. Amanda sighed and answered the call. The Hendersons lived 2 blocks down, and they often would hire either Stephanie or herself to babysit. That in and of itself wasn't a problem. Amanda liked babysitting. But the Henderson child was a monster. Hello? Amanda, I'm glad you answered. I'm in kind of a desperate situation, and I was wondering if you're free today to watch little Ollie. Normally, I wouldn't ask on such short notice, but my sitter just called and she's sick. I'm hoping you're free today. Amanda's vision of her free day swirled down the drain. All day? Can you? That would be great. I have to leave in an hour. Could you be here in 45 minutes? I'm willing to pay extra because of the short notice. The extra pay was incentive, and what else would she do anyway? Maybe Oliver wouldn't be so bad today. Yes, I can be there in 45 minutes. You're a lifesaver. Thank you. Mrs. Henderson hung up, and Amanda rummaged through her closet to find something to wear. Maybe she could take Ollie to the park if it wasn't too cold out. He always liked running around. Chapter 18. Cole clicked on his mouse, searching for the zillionth time to find a way to somehow convince his father that restoring the old opera house would be a better investment than knocking it down and building a parking garage. But no matter how he did the math, it wouldn't work. His father would never invest in something that had diminishing returns. He let out a frustrated grunt and pushed back in his desk chair. He had to go talk to his father. There was no other way. But if he had no ammunition, he would just make his father angry for no reason. He lifted a barbell he had sitting in the corner of his room. Working his muscles always helped him think. The Opera House could be another community theater, but they already had one. A nicer, newer one. Rockford wasn't large enough to have two of them. He thought about all the old costumes and props sitting in the storage room in the back. His father could turn the Opera House into a museum. Except most museums were not moneymakers, and his father wouldn't sink investment money into something that needed government funding to limp along. The memory of that night with Amanda settled in his mind. He wanted an excuse to go see her today, and the one thing he could think of was to research Lily Foster. Amanda seemed interested in who she was. If he could come up with some cool information about Lily, he could use it as an excuse to meet with her. He typed in the name and opera singer in his search engine. A wealth of information popped onto his screen. As he looked at the website that came up first, he started to grow excited. The answer to saving the Opera House just might be Lily Foster. Amanda buckled Ollie into his car seat, making sure it was snug on him. Now, you'll have to be good at them all, okay? His shock of blonde hair was getting long, as if he wouldn't hold still for a decent haircut. He looked up at her with his wide blue eyes. I want to get ice cream. If you're good, we'll get ice cream. What if I can't be good? He stuck out his bottom lip. Amanda tousled his hair. You can be good. I've seen you be good. He laid his head back in his car seat. But it's so hard. All you have to do is follow the rules. Don't hit, don't bite, and play nice. Amanda remembered the last time she'd taken him to the mall and added one more. And don't run off. Okay, he said, his voice low and growly, like he didn't think he could do it. Come on, let's go have fun. You love climbing on the plastic animals. Amanda tried to keep her voice light, even though she had a sinking suspicion that this trip was going to end in disaster. Ollie didn't play nice with other kids, and he didn't like to obey. But she'd had him cooped up in his house all morning and now wanted to let him run around. At least the play area had a swinging gate that latched. As long as I can have ice cream! Amanda rolled her eyes and shut the back door on her passenger side. Maybe if you misbehave and don't get ice cream, next time you'll behave better, she muttered under her breath. The afternoon was chilly, and Amanda rubbed her hands together. Soon she would need to break out the gloves. She got in her car and started the engine, turning up the heat. She drove them to the mall and parked in the lot closest to the children's play area. She grabbed her purse and slung it over her shoulder, then walked around the car and opened the back door. Ollie wasn't in his car seat. Panic shot through her until she saw him sitting in the driver's seat, his hands on the steering wheel. She gasped and put her hand over her heart. "Oliver! Come here! You scared me!" "But I want to drive." "You're not old enough to drive. Come here." Ollie grunted and climbed out of the seat, over the console, and took a hold of Amanda's hand. "Do I get ice cream now?" His shoelace had come untied. "Not yet," she said, tying his laces. "Let's see how well you behave in the play area." Amanda held his hand and walked with him through the parking lot. "Now wait," she said before they stepped out into traffic. "You have to look both ways before crossing the street. Remember?" "I remember," Ollie called out in a sing-song voice. Then he proceeded to look back and forth. "How many times do I have to look both ways, Amanda?" She held back a smile. "Just look to make sure no car is coming before you cross. Do you see any cars?" He pointed. "There's one way down there." Amanda looked down the street. "Well, that car isn't moving, and it's super far away. We are safe to cross." Ollie tried to let go of her hand, but she held on tight. "You have to cross with me, Ollie." "But you're so slow," he said, tugging her along. "It's not safe to run out into the street." He jumped onto the curb. "Okay." She walked with him into the mall. When he saw the play area, he tried to run from her again, but she was used to him and hung on. "Just walk, Ollie." When they were safely in the gate, Amanda let go of Ollie's hand and he ran to the turtle to climb on its back. Amanda sat down on the padded benches that surrounded the play area and watched Ollie. Her phone chimed in her pocket, and she pulled it out. She'd gotten a text from Cole.
"I'm sorry about last night."
Amanda's heart jumped in her chest. She was sorry, too. She hated that they left things so bad between them. She liked Cole a lot, and she acted like a child last night. Getting mad when she didn't get her way? It was stupid, and she felt ashamed. Her fingers shook as she typed back to him. "Me too." Ollie climbed on the back of the lion, then up his mane to his head. He stood, balanced on it. "Be careful, Ollie," she called. He shot her a defiant look, but climbed down the lion's back. Her phone vibrated, and she looked at the screen.
"I'd like to see you if you're okay with that. You home?"
She wanted to see him, too, to apologize in person, but she couldn't right now. "Sorry, I'm babysitting the Henderson boy. We're currently at the mall. He was driving me crazy at his house."
"That's too bad."
"I know. I'm wishing I were home right now. Haha."
"Me too."
Amanda's pulse jumped. Cole wanted to see her. Maybe they could mend things. She wanted another chance to talk, to make things right between them. She didn't want to blame him anymore for the demolition his father was doing. It wasn't his fault. She watched Ollie jumping from the frog to the lion and back again. Another group of kids joined them in the play area. Amanda tensed, knowing Ollie sometimes had trouble sharing, but he didn't react poorly when the other kids came and started climbing on the animals. Ollie played for another half hour without any incidents with the other children. When he was within earshot, Amanda called to him, and he ran over to her. "You're playing very nicely today, Ollie." "I am?" His eyes widened and he smiled. "Yes. Do you want to go get ice cream now?" "Can I play for a few more minutes? We're playing zoo." "Sure." He clapped his hands and ran to his newfound friends. Someone leaned over her shoulder.
"You look happy."
She turned to see Cole leaning over the bench, his arms leaning on the back. Her pulse involuntarily jumped. She smiled at him. I am happy. Ollie's obeying. That's a first. He chuckled as he opened the gate and sat next to her.
He doesn't, usually?
Today he's being good. We'll see in a few minutes, I guess, but for now, I'm happy.
Great.
Cole's grin widened. What about you? You look happy too. Did you win the lottery or something?
Something.
He didn't expound on that, and she let it go. I need to apologize. In person. She suddenly felt self-conscious and looked down at her lap. It was hard for her to admit she'd been wrong this whole time. She had behaved badly. I shouldn't have gotten upset with you last night, or before. I was wrong. He seemed stunned.
Wrong?
Her throat swelled. Yeah, you can't help who your father is. You're not the one destroying my She stopped, embarrassed about what she was going to say.
Destroying your father?
He asked quietly. She shook her head as she watched Ollie duck down behind one of the animals. I didn't mean to say that.
But that's how you feel. Your memories of him, your emotional attachment. It's because of him.
His words were kind, even though she knew he couldn't possibly understand. I guess so, but I realized last night that you weren't to blame. You didn't do anything to deserve my anger. She looked at him, into his blue eyes. They held a sincerity that choked her. I'm sorry.
I forgive you.
He'd said it so quietly, she almost didn't hear him. She blinked. You do? His eyes smiled at her.
Yes.
She drew nearer to him. How can you, just like that?
Because I need you to forgive me as well.
For what?
For not supporting you.
A flashback of her conversation with her secret texter made her pause. He'd said something about her feeling unsupported. She brushed off the similarity and swallowed back emotion. I forgive you too. He touched the side of her face, and she leaned into him.
Can we start over?
All over? Because it wasn't all bad, was it? He was so close she could smell his breath. It was minty.
No, it wasn't all bad. I especially liked this part.
He closed the distance between them, his lips covering hers. She closed her eyes, her skin erupting in tingles as he slowly explored her lips. She kissed him for a minute before pulling back. She blushed. Yeah, I liked that part too. He grabbed her hand.
I have something to tell you.
You do?
Yes, I did some digging, and I found out something that might save your opera house.
At first, his words didn't register. Amanda stared at his teeth and wondered exactly what he'd said. Then it started to filter through her brain. What? She asked, her voice small.
I think I've found the answer. It's Lily Foster. She's the one that will save it.
He squeezed her hand like she should know exactly what he was talking about. Lily Foster?
Yes, there's a whole foundation to preserve her memory. They've been looking for a place where they can build an academy in her name. They've been raising money, Mandy. The opera house would be perfect.
Amanda squinted at him. Wait, I don't get it. The opera house would be perfect for what?
For the Lily Foster Academy. They want to teach underprivileged kids how to sing and play music.
She didn't understand. How was that going to profit Asher Industries? But your dad doesn't want to teach kids how to sing. He's the one who owns the building.
He's been having some PR problems. I don't know the extent of it, but he really wants Asher Industries to look good. If he could donate the building to the Lily Foster Foundation, they could restore it and have an academy that also preserves history. An actual opera house where Lily Foster once performed. Don't you see? This is perfect.
Have you said anything to your father yet?
He shook his head. Not yet, but I will. I promise.
She swallowed, emotion swelling in her throat. You'd approach him with this for me?
Yes.
He hesitated, then looked down.
I'd do anything for you.
She pressed her lips to his again in another kiss. Thank you. Cole grinned at her.
So, which kid is the one you're babysitting?
She scanned the animals and the children playing on them. More kids had joined in the area, and she hadn't noticed. She didn't see Ollie right offhand, but he'd been playing hide-and-seek with the other kids. She stood. Ollie? Come here! Time for ice cream! Several kids stopped and turned to her at the mention of the treat. But Ollie didn't come out. Ollie? She called again, louder this time. When he didn't pop up, she rushed over to the play area, searching between the animals. Ollie wasn't in there. Her heart hammered in her chest, and she turned to Cole. He's gone, she said, her voice strangled. He must have gotten out when some other kids came in. Cole put his hand on her shoulder.
Don't worry, we'll find him. He couldn't have gone far.
Don't worry. She was trusted with a child, and she lost him. She was a horrible babysitter. She'd been kissing Cole instead of watching Ollie. Panic enveloped her. You don't know Ollie, she said, rushing out of the play area and scanning down the different hallways. He could have gone down any of them. Cole must have been thinking the same thing because he turned in all directions.
Where would he head? Was there somewhere he wanted to go?
Yes, of course. The ice cream shop.
That way,
Cole said, pointing. She ran down the hallway with Cole following close behind her. She silently prayed Ollie would be in there. She entered the shop, her heart in her throat. At first, she didn't see him, but then the crowd parted, and she saw his blonde hair. He was standing at the counter, his nose pressed to the glass. He turned and she rushed to him, throwing her arms around him. She hugged him close to her, her heart pounding. She pulled him back and looked at his face. I was so worried about you. Why did you leave the play area? It was time for ice cream, and you were kissing that guy, so I went to get some myself. Heat burned her cheeks. You're right. It's time for ice cream. Maybe if she bought him the treat, he wouldn't think to tell his mother she'd been kissing a boy at the mall.
What flavor do you want, buddy?
Cole pointed to the glass. Chocolate chunk. Cole stepped up to the counter and ordered his cone.
Do you want one?
He asked, turning to Amanda. She was feeling so guilty for what had happened. Her stomach didn't feel good. No, thank you. He squeezed her shoulder.
It's okay. He's fine.
She took in a deep breath. He was right. Ollie was fine. He was standing on his tiptoes, waiting for his ice cream. He had a huge smile on his face. He hadn't been scared or worried. He'd only been gone a split second. They'd found him right afterwards. Still, she was guilt-ridden. And she was going to have to tell his mother what happened. Chapter 19. Cole let out a breath and opened his father's office door. His father looked up from the computer.
Oh, hello, Cole.
He looked back at the screen.
I don't really have much work for you today, but tomorrow after school we should have more data entry.
Cole stuck his hands in his pockets.
I'm not here for work.
His father cocked his head to the side and took a long look at him.
Okay. What do you need?
Nerves cascaded through him.
I want to talk to you about the opera house. What about it? I think I know a way you can help with your PR situation.
He launched into his pitch, his words fighting over each other to get out. He talked about Lily Foster and the foundation and how they are looking for a place to start an academy and how donating the building to them would make Asher Industries look amazing and how he could build his parking garage down the street. When he got all done, he closed his mouth and waited for his father to react. At first, his father didn't do anything. He just sat there and clenched his jaw. Then he steepled his fingers.
You've really thought this through, haven't you?
Yes. His father looked up at the ceiling, his face contemplative.
The company has been in the news lately, with that groundwater scandal that's been going on. This might take some of the heat off that situation.
Cole saw a glimmer of hope.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
His father gave him a small smile.
You know, my grandmother used to listen to old opera records. I remember the one from Lily Foster.
Seriously?
Yes. I wonder if I still have that record. I'll have to look.
Cole tried not to get his hopes up too much.
Does that mean you'll donate the building?
His father sighed.
There's too much money into this project to donate it, but let me contact the Lily Foster Foundation and talk to them. Maybe they can buy the building.
Cole swallowed. It wasn't a complete win, but it was something. And if the foundation would buy the building, he could save it for Amanda.
Thank you for looking into it.
His father scrutinized him.
Why do you care so much about the opera house? You've never mentioned it before.
Great. Now he was stuck.
There's a girl I know. The opera house means a lot to her. It's where her parents met, and her father passed away when she was young, so...
A look of understanding crossed his features.
She associates the building with her father. Yes. And you understand because you lost your mother at a young age.
Cole blinked back emotion.
Yeah, I guess so.
His father nodded.
I'll call the foundation and speak to them, and I'll check into the other property. You know this would put me behind schedule. I know, but maybe the foundation would be willing to call it the Lily Foster and Asher Industries Academy. Cole grinned. Good PR.
His father chuckled.
And would help you win the affections of this girl.
Cole froze. Was it that obvious? He let out a nervous chuckle.
Something like that? I'll see what I can do.
He pointed to him.
No promises, remember? That's fine. Just the fact that you'll look into something else is going to make Amanda very happy. Glad to help.
His father turned back to his computer screen, but when Cole didn't leave, he gave him a look over his glasses.
Need something else?
Cole fidgeted. His father's girlfriend status had been on his mind since last night, and he kind of wanted to ask about it, but wasn't sure how. Finally, he blurted out,
I just had a question, and it's kind of an awkward question, so I'm debating how to ask.
His father took off his glasses and gave Cole his full attention.
Out with it. Are you seeing someone?
His father got a funny look on his face. Almost a mixture of surprise and humor.
Why do you ask? Because you've been spending more late nights at the office?
He didn't want to admit he'd seen lipstick on his face last night, so he kept that one to himself. After a deep breath and a sigh, his father nodded.
As a matter of fact, I have been dating someone. And you're old enough. I should have told you about her. Who is she? She's a woman I met at the country club. Her name is Diane.
Cole watched him try to hide a smile, unsuccessfully, and he grinned as well.
When do I get to meet her? I'll see if she can come to dinner this week.
Cole's mouth dropped.
You're going to cook dinner? Well, maybe we should cater dinner.
He chuckled, and Cole marveled at the transformation of his father. Since when did he smile and laugh so much?
Sounds good, Dad,
Cole said. He stood and walked toward the door, marveling at how well the conversation had gone. His father was going to look into the Lily Foster Foundation and had not yelled at him for suggesting it. Maybe this was all due to Diane? Chapter 20. Amanda gripped her lunch tray as she walked toward their usual table. Her gaze immediately met Cole's. A smile spread across his face, and her knees grew a little bit weak. He was having that effect on her recently. She walked to their table and set down her tray. "Hey." He nodded to her.
So, how bad was it?
How bad was what?
How embarrassing was it to admit you were kissing me instead of watching the kid you were supposed to be babysitting?
His grin widened. Heat rushed to her cheeks, and she whacked him on his shoulder before she settled into her seat. I may have left out the part about the kissing, but Mrs. Henderson was really cool about the whole thing. She said Ollie gets away from her all the time, and she called him a little stinker. She said I was a good babysitter for telling her what happened. She even gave me a raise for being so responsible.
You lose a kid, then get a raise? Wow, sounds like a great employer.
Funny. She rolled her eyes. How are things going? She left the question cryptic. He knew what she meant. He texted her last night and told her he'd approached his father and things had gone well. He laughed.
No word yet, I promise. I'll tell you when I know something.
Destiny and Eli joined them at the table. Destiny poked Amanda in the side. Have you been reading the comments on your sister's vlog? Amanda shook her head. No, I don't watch her vlog. I would have no reason to read the comments. They are getting very interesting. She's having some kind of a war with one of the commenters, the one who goes by Brandon Travers. Amanda laughed. She did tell me about that guy. What is he saying? Just that Brandon Travers is amazing and she should apologize for what she said. And, of course, your sister is telling him to get a life. But their back and forth is funny. You should read it. Maybe I will. Amanda ate her slice of pizza. She'd grabbed a sausage one today, and it was not half bad. After she took a large bite, she pulled out her phone and texted her secret texter. So, are you in the lunchroom right now? She sent it off and glanced around. It hadn't worked before, but maybe she'd just had bad luck? You never know, right? Maybe it would work this time. Cole stood up.
I'll be right back.
Eli made a face.
Where are you going? Bathroom?
Man, you don't have to give us the play-by-play. Cole rubbed Eli's head until his hair was messed up.
I wasn't.
Stop it, man. Cole snickered and left the lunchroom. Amanda looked at her phone, waiting for a response. It took a second, but one finally came through.
No, I'm not.
She grew suspicious. Cole left the table. Was he in the hallway texting her? She'd suspected it was him from the start, but he'd said it wasn't. Now she wasn't so sure. She texted back. Who is this?
We're back to that now?
Yes, I want to know.
Why do you need to?
Amanda stood from the table. This wasn't going to get her anywhere. She needed to find Cole, to confront him about her suspicions. I'll be right back, too. Eli gave her an obnoxious grin.
Oh, I see.
She scoffed and whacked the back of his head. It's not like that. Eli just laughed as she walked out the same door Cole had. It didn't take long to spot him. Cole was sitting on the staircase, his phone in his hand. It's you, isn't it? Amanda called to him. He jumped up, a guilty expression on his face. Amanda walked to him and shoved his chest. Not that it did anything. He was a solid wall of muscle. You jerk! She turned to run the other way, but he caught her around her middle and pulled her to him.
Amanda, I can explain.
Her throat burned with the betrayal. You lied to me! She twisted in his arms and shoved against him. He let her go.
I never lied.
Yes, you did! You said it wasn't you! He shook his head.
No, you never came out and asked me.
Amanda paused. Was this true? Was he right? She thought back to their interactions. She had suspected Cole, but maybe she had never come out and asked him.
Mandy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It started out as a joke. But then you were so mad at me in real life, and you acted like you wanted to talk to me as your secret texter that I kind of kept doing it as a way to get you to open up to me. I like talking to you.
Guilt flooded through her. He was right. She'd been mad and so unfair to him. He didn't deserve how she'd been treating him. She lowered her head and stepped toward him. I'm sorry, she said, reaching for his hand. I shouldn't have gotten mad at you. I've treated you badly. Cole pulled her close to his chest.
You are officially forgiven.
She snuggled into him. I can be a little passionate about things sometimes. I'm sure the opera house won't be the only thing we disagree on, but I can try to be more understanding and less centered on just what I want. Cole held her tight.
And I'll be more supportive, even if it means standing up to my father.
Which turned out pretty good, huh? He smiled at her.
Yeah, it did.
Come on, let's go finish lunch, and we can tell Eli and Destiny we are official. Amanda heard a squeal behind her, and Destiny came running up to them. You're official? Cole chuckled.
I guess we are.
Oh my gosh, I knew it. I knew you guys would end up together. Destiny hugged them both. Eli stepped into the hallway.
What did I miss?
Destiny jumped up and down and let out another squeal. They made it official! They are a couple.
Oh, thank heavens. Now you guys can get all that kissing out of your system.
Not a bad idea, Amanda said, and raised up on her toes to press her lips to Cole's. Her world tilted as he gave her an amazing kiss.
Okay. Let's go back in before the bell rings. I want to finish my lunch,
Eli said. Cole just chuckled and slung his arm around Amanda.
Want to come over tonight and beat me at poker?
Amanda grinned at him, her heart light. You're on. Epilogue. Stephanie clicked and ended her broadcast. Another successful show done. Her followers had grown this last week. Not that she had a ton of followers, but she'd passed the 3,000 mark, which made her excited. It was a milestone she'd been wanting to reach. A message popped up on her screen. Oh, brother. It was another message from that fake Brandon Travers account. She rolled her eyes, but clicked on it anyway. It was a private message this time. He was getting bolder. Great. Just what she needed. She opened it.
Just watched your latest vlog. I totally agree. There are way too many remakes going on right now. What's up with that? Why don't they come up with something new? My manager wants me to read for a remake of The Breakfast Club. Why in the world do they think that's a good idea?
Stephanie scoffed. She hadn't heard of any remake of The Breakfast Club coming down the pike. Who was this guy? Your manager? You're still trying to convince me you are the real Brandon Travers? Come on! Stop pretending. This is getting a bit ridiculous. Another message came right away.
Sheesh, girl. What do I have to do to convince you?
She had him now. Send me your picture. He didn't message right away, so she scoffed and shut her laptop. What a dweeb. How gullible did he think she was anyway? Her phone rang, and she looked at the screen. It was Jade. She picked up. Hey, what's up? I did it! Jade's voice had that excitement in it, the kind only Jade had. She was the complete opposite of the stereotypical drama student, moody and solemn. Jade was perky. There just was no other word for it. What did you do? I finished my app. The Rockford High dating app. Jade giggled. It will give you your perfect match. Stephanie knew she'd been working on it, but she had no idea she was that close to being done. Seriously? Yes, and you're going to help me advertise it. Stephanie choked. Me? What are you talking about? Come on, you're like the most famous person in our class. You have your own YouTube show. It's a vlog. Everyone follows you. They all listen to you. If you tell everyone to download my app, it will become the next big thing. Jade obviously had way too much confidence in Stephanie. She tried not to shut her down too fast. My show isn't really about dating apps. No, but you could mention it like an endorsement. People would go nuts for it. What are you charging? It's free. That's the beauty. Everyone can log in and fill out the form, so we have a database. Then, after we gain popularity, I can monetize it, sell ads or something. I want to keep it free for users. Stephanie chewed her bottom lip. Will it be that popular, though, if it's just for our school? Jade made an excited squee noise. That's what's so cool. It's expandable. I can make an app for every school. But I want to try it out with Rockford High first. Work out all the bugs. You can be my very first customer. Stephanie inwardly groaned. She didn't want to download a dating app. She didn't want to date at all. She was on a man diet. Ever since Kyle destroyed her heart, she was not interested in love. Do I have to? You know how I feel about men right now. You just hate guys because you haven't found your perfect match yet. Let me do that for you. You mean let your app do that? Same thing. I wrote the app. Just download it and take the test. See what it's like. You might find your true love. Stephanie closed her eyes. Maybe. You know you'll do this for me because you love me. Jade laughed. Of course I love you. Because you'll save me if I'm stuck on a horrible date, right? She opened her laptop and checked the comments on her vlog. She usually got a few after one of her shows. You know it! Jade was always there for her. She knew she meant it. Stephanie stared at her screen and almost dropped her phone. Holy crap. The words slipped out without her meaning to say them. What is it? Her chest constricted as she looked at the photo in her inbox. It couldn't be real. Could it? It was a photo of Brandon Travers. He held a piece of paper that said, "Believe it's me, Stephanie." She swallowed, her fingers shaking. Dang, that looks real, she said under her breath. What looks real? Steph, talk to me. Sorry, I got a message from this guy that's been leaving messages on my vlog. His username is Brandon Travers, and he just sent me a photo that looks amazingly like Brandon Travers. There's a million photos of Brandon Travers on the internet. I know, but he's holding a paper that has my name on it. It's kind of creepy how real it looks. It's photoshopped. She was right. Of course she was. Yeah, I know. She typed a quick message back to him. You're good with Photoshop. A message came back right away. Check my Twitter account. What are you doing? Jade asked. I don't know. He says to check his Twitter account. Brandon Travers? Let me go look. Noises came through as Jade fiddled with her phone. Then she heard Jade scream.
What? What's on his Twitter?
Jade came back on.
It's him, Steph. You've been chatting with the real Brandon.
How do you know?
Because he just told his 55 million followers to go check out your vlog.
Stephanie stopped breathing. She clicked over to her vlog, her pulse racing. 3,050 followers. She'd gained 50 followers in a matter of seconds. She clicked to refresh the screen.
4,026. She swallowed. Hard.
Gotta go, she said into her phone and set it down. She wasn't even sure if she pressed the red hang-up button. She was numb. It really was Brandon Travers talking to her. Crap. She'd been telling him off for the past week.
Thank you for listening to my book. Find out what happens between Stephanie and Brandon in my next book, Don't Trash the Heartthrob. Join my newsletter and never miss an announcement for a new book written by Victorine. You'll find a link in the comments. Join my Patreon and get access to all of my audiobooks commercial-free. You'll also get access to brand new books that I'm writing before anyone else. You'll get to read them as I write them, and you'll help support me so I can continue to write.
This has been Don't Kiss Your Enemy. Written by Victorine Liskey, narrated by Liz Crane. Copyright 2021 by Victorine Liskey.